Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's...
No, Chair, just wait till we got to get on. Thank you. We're now on air, and warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming to our meeting this afternoon. A reminder for those that are in the room in particular that we have for mobile phones, if you could switch it off as it does interfere with our recording. The meetings are recorded, and we welcome those that are listening online as well. A welcome to you. I have one apology, that's from Councillor Mackenzie. Otherwise, we're all here. So that's officially open the meeting, and please be seated. Thank you. I just have one mayoral acknowledgement I'd like to do this morning as well, this morning. And that is congratulations to Jess from our council. Jess Nesbitt, she's won the Citizen of the Year Award for 2020 with Keep Australia Beautiful Sustainable Communities Award. Absolutely fantastic, great achievement. And that is for her own work, her own commitment to the work with council, but also in the community in Hillwood. So we really thank Jess for that and appreciate that. And that was handed out on Friday, Cradle Mountain. The Citizen Award is the second biggest award of the event, and the first being the Tidy Town Award, which went to Penguin. So great achievement. Thank you. Declaration of interest. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 16.2, Community Grants Round 1, specifically the Rotary Club of Tamer Sunrise, of which I am the Secretary.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Mayor, 16.3, Million Paws Walk Community Grants.
Thank you, Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Yes, Mayor. Items 9.1 and 9.2.
And Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 16.3, community grants.
Thank you. So that's a declaration of interest. Confirmation of minutes. I'm happy to move the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of October. Deputy Mayor moves. Seconded Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We have no deputations, no petitions, no community reports, so public questions on notice are there. And any public questions not on notice, now's a chance to ask your questions. Anyone would like to come and ask a question? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge the land on which we're standing, being that of the Palawa people, and also acknowledge their past, present and emerging elders. Today I'm wearing my Amnesty hat, and I have a question. Amnesty International activist hat, I should say. When is the earliest Launceston Council will permanently fly the Aboriginal flag above the Town Hall alongside the the national Australian flag.
Yep, thank you. We fly the Aboriginal flag at QV Mag, which we've done for many, many years. It's part of our policy. We also fly it at Home Point, but we're now it's going to come back to Council in the new year with a policy on whether we extend that.
Does Council agree that there is a difference in reconciliation message and status when the Aboriginal flag is placed alongside the Aboriginal flag, the Australian flag, and permanently flying at the Town Hall? This will provide a more significant and more official message of acknowledgement than that of the flag at QV Mag or at Home Point.
Well, QV Mag is our cultural centre and it's extremely important, we believe, but that's something that we'll be considering as a council in the new year.
Would you hasten your efforts and proceed with prudence but with intent to get it done as soon as possible?
We will get it done as soon as practical.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? No? No one coming? I can't see. So then under the provisions of the... I thought there was someone for a question. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to the items included in agenda items 9, Planning Authority. So we have 9.1, 2 and 7 Willis Street. So we have a number of speakers. First of all, I've got here Joseph Cromie and Sam Tucker. So that's separate altogether.
Hello. Thank you. I guess I'm not good with speaking, but I find it has been very important for today here. Not possible about what was here before. And big progress on the building, and I think looking around now that Tasmania will be happy, very happy with what happened in Launceston, and Council will be happy. I will be happy. Please, I have a letter for me. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think you've probably understood the gist of Joe's challenge to speak. So he's written a letter and asked me to speak on his behalf. So it reads, I spoke to you all at the first UTAS development application for the library to tell you all that education is the key to success in life. More people being educated in Launceston is great for our city and great for our children, great for our grandchildren, great for our great-grandchildren. The development applications today are the last major UTAS projects on this site, and I wanted again to make my point about how important education is. Such big projects give so many great opportunities to all people of Launceston and Tasmania to learn and to improve and to change their lives. Tasmanian people have always had to go to the mainland to continue their learning and to make careers. When this project is finished, people from all over the mainland and the world will come to this campus to learn and to start their professional lives. The finished buildings will be something that we'll all be proud of. I'll be even more proud to be from Launceston. UTAS will be proud and the City of Launceston will be proud. All of Tasmania will be proud of this development. I'm turning 90 years young in 6 weeks' time, only 10 years until my retirement. I've seen Launceston transform in my time here, and some of my projects have contributed to that change. The UTAS campus will bring the biggest change to Launceston that I have seen. This is exciting and I want to see this finished project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Don Wing.
Mr Mayor and councillors, for many years several colleagues and I have been campaigning to have the status of the university in Launceston raised, mainly by means of substantially increasing the number of professors and associate professors, and by reinstating courses in Launceston that had been transferred to Hobart. We did not participate in the debate on the transfer of the UTAS campus in Launceston from Newnham to Inveresk, but I take the view that the decision to transfer having been made, it is now important to work to achieve the best possible development at Inveresk. Therefore, I support this application in the knowledge that much thought and extensive consultation has been undertaken with emphasis given to disability and environmental matters, including measures to deal with any possible flooding. The proposal is a contemporary design which incorporates modern methods of teaching and learning and sends a strong message that Launceston is a proud university city. This new academic building has a focus on allied health, nursing, food, science and physical education. It is to be a people-centric building that will provide glimpses to research and learning, a place designed for university, industry, government and community to engage and collaborate within. I support the application.
Thank you very much. Professor Rufus Black.
Mr Mayor, councillors, I speak in support of this application. The Willis Street building will provide vital infrastructure for this city, for the entire state and indeed far beyond. It provides the most contemporary facilities for science education and learning, the development of health professionals and indeed a wider group than that. The building will contribute vitally to the city. It's a building designed for community and it's been designed with community. It's designed to operate in a wide range of hours, respectful, of course, of the operational requirements of the neighbourhood. It is designed to be accessible in a way few university buildings are, to be a people's university building, with facilities and invitation easily designed into the whole way that it operates. It is a building profoundly respectful of the history of Launceston. Its design and structure speaks to what was there before, the train sheds, the industrial heritage, and gives it a modern interpretation. It shows how we can transform the past and speak boldly of an optimistic future for the city. It is about the future of the city, this building. It respects the heights of the city. It works well within the height guidelines and seeks to be kind and generous to the buildings around it. It is a building that sits with the city's sustainability agenda. It will have more than a third less carbon embodied in it than any of its comparable peers. It pushes sustainability technology to their very global cutting-edge limits. It will speak of Launceston's future values as well as it talks about its past history. It's a building I believe that the city will be able to be profoundly proud of, will contribute deeply to its life and embody its best values. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Next, David Peach.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. David Peach for the Launceston Chamber of Commerce. The role of the Chamber of Commerce is to be the voice of business in Launceston and has an interest in supporting this development application. Since I've been in Launceston, I've observed its intent to be a great city, great regional city of the world. And for the Chamber, that mixes the best of education, lifestyle, economy, health, tourism and amenity. It's a major part of why I chose to abandon Sydney and come to Launceston. Many of the world's other great cities, like Launceston, are university cities. This case, it's not just a place of learning, it's an integrated citizen in its own right. Predictably, this brings with it some compromise along the way, but offers shared precincts, industry and community partnerships, university-led symposia, and when the students come back, vibrancy. The university is of the city, and so too the city must embrace the university as the university's role in placemaking. Now more than ever, the economic inputs of this once-in-a-generation transformation are vitally important. Local activity and construction, longer-term increase in the number of educated people in the Greater Launceston area through attraction of skilled migration, and of course output of graduates. Around that is private sector coalesces with economic input as well. Universities cross-license technologies to the private sector Academics consult for business, graduate students, researchers and professors start their own businesses, companies establish research centres and hire smart people from the uni to do smart things, and universities provide forums for local entrepreneurs and innovators to exchange. So this all leads to the betterment of business, and the Chamber of Commerce wholeheartedly supports the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Murdoch.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Councillors. I'm speaking today as a representative of the Office of the Coordinator General. John Perry wished for me to outline that he would have liked to have attended in person to speak to this matter, but unfortunately he has other commitments. I'm speaking to outline the support of our office for the development application submitted by the University of Tasmania for Willow Street. This building is a critical component of the new University of Tasmania's campus at Inveresk. Our investment outcomes, the year, as we all know, we've been working for 4 years with the university to relocate the campus to Inveresk. Our support for these developments is evident in the state government's commitment of $60 million to the project. This year, COVID has thrown the regional economy and community of Launceston some significant challenges. The economic stimulus that will result from these, the construction of these developments will go a long way to helping to support our construction industry. Our investment outcomes for this development, though, are not just linked to the economic benefits generated from construction. The core purpose of this development will be to increase the campus to 16,000 students. Achieving these targets will improve the education attainments for students in northern Tasmania, as well as generating significant investment per year into the regional economy for every student that moves to Launceston to complete their university studies. For the university to achieve this bold target, of course, it needs a modern campus that students wish to attend. We believe that the designs put forward significantly achieve this. I enthusiastically support the design aspects of the new education and research facilities, and am aware that the Heritage Tasmania has had input into the designs to ensure that they respect and set well within the historical and industrial context.
Yep. Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Daly.
Afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. I speak to support the application, and my reason for speaking to support Riverbend in particular is because I believe in that it will improve participation for our Launceston children. And I guess, in a way, I speak particularly for the children of Launceston. I worked on that site. I know how pivotal it is to the community. And it's already a destination. And it's a destination of locals and visitors alike. It's particularly a destination of children, of school children. And it is known and loved, and its heritage is valued. It's accessible and inclusive, something a current site at Mowbray is not. Riverbend is now a popular destination for lots of things: football, museum, art gallery, recreation and for study. It is well known and well visited, and most of Launceston's young people and Northern Tasmanians' young people visit it often. So it's a place that they already feel they belong. And the new site, with teachers, researchers, students and student support service, will provide for them a tangible picture of what the university is. It will showcase what the university is about, and our children will grow up with it. They go there for so many things, and they will have that feeling of belonging. And I predict that it will then be a more natural progression than it is now. The importance, too, of adding vitality to what is now a predominantly an ageing population in Launceston. This site will showcase young people engaged in education and in their city. It's a model that we certainly must encourage, rather than one of, the university's not for me.
Thank you. Your time is up as well. Now, that's all I have on the list. Any other speakers that want to do 9.1? No, thank you. So moved Councillor Finlay, seconded Deputy Mayor. Councillor Finlay, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, I do, Mayor, and I welcome and acknowledge all of the members of the community that have attended the meeting today and presented their support for the project. I think it's important. Today we sit as a planning authority, we're here to interrogate the elements of the proposal and how it fits within the scheme, but it doesn't go without a reasonable commentary about the transformation that a successful and well-designed university facility will have within a campus and a community precinct in Launceston. We particularly in this item are talking about the development at Willis Street, and for many members of Northern Tasmania and Launceston as a larger city have been really focused on how the development of the university campus at Inverest links into the CBD and reinforces, as has been mentioned by some, the opportunities through business, the economy, the community, families, for everyone to engage with this site. So Willis Street, in fact, as a development is pivotal to achieving that outcome between connecting the heart of Launceston and the areas that are developing along the river across to Inverest. Particularly speaking to the item today as a planning application, there are only 4 elements where discretion has been considered in the item before us, and I think that's testament to the work that the university has done, both with the community, with their architects and with our planners, to ensure that what are once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to have this level of investment and this quality of architecture produced within the city, but is done so in a way that meets and respects the heritage qualities of the area, is considerate to the neighbours, where we're understanding through both the development and ongoing use. There's a response and a conversation going between this development and the way the community will engage with this and other businesses in the area. I'm proud to stand and move this motion today. I'm comfortable that as interrogating the elements of the design and the requirements of the planning scheme, that it does more than reasonably meet the requirements of the scheme, and I look forward to the breaking of ground and the development of this pivotal site for the University of Tasmania in Launceston.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Will I too stand to support the motion that is before us and to acknowledge the speakers that have been with us today, but also those that took time to contribute written representations to the item. The interrogation of those items by the planner has been appreciated, and certainly the ability for us as councillors to engage in robust conversation in coming to understand the item, and importantly to understand the discretions that we're being asked to consider today. And Councillor Finlay referenced the 4, but I think it's important to spell them out. Those are building height, car parking, the activation of the ground floors, and indeed the excavation that's required. I think it's important to note that at this stage the application is only for the science building, but I think through the master plan process we've seen the outline of what this transformational project is going to achieve, and importantly the way that each of the parts interconnect with each other. Early on in the process of arriving at the point that we're at now, I was questioning of the way that it seemed that we were being drip fed what the overarching vision for the plan was. But in recent years, and certainly in recent leadership, we've come to really be consulted and be a key partner in this project, and that has been appreciated. I note the concerns that have been raised, but I think importantly, and one of the speakers mentioned it, many of the concerns that have been raised are not in fact planning considerations, nor are they things that at this point of the project are things that need to be considered. The race is run in terms of whether or not the university is going to relocate, and this considerable DA shows the confidence and the strength of the project and the outstanding result that we're going to get as a City of Launceston and as a state, and I commend the motion to the table.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the previous speakers and also the members of the public who have also spoken on this matter. They've really said it all from my point of view. I just wanted to reiterate what Don Wing, the former Mayor of the city, had said, is that the decision to move the campus has already been made, and our decision now is to make the best of what we're doing with contemporary design to ensure that's what we get as far as our part of the deal goes. And I think that this new building in Willow Street will help do that. Once the bridge is connected to it, it will open up onto the city park area and enable pedestrian and cycling traffic and other movement between the site at Inveresk and into Willow Street, into City Park and on into the city. So I think it is to be commended. I guess we could say much the same about the next item on the agenda, but hopefully we perhaps won't talk so much about it. But I do think it's very important that if Launceston is to be a great regional city, that we do have an active university. And I'll perhaps just mention briefly, I spoke to a current student of the current campus at Newnham, what his view on it was, whether it was suitable and whether it was contemporary. And he said, having visited one of his friends who had left the island 2 years ago to start his university career in Sydney, when he went to the university there, the difference was marked as to what he saw as far as buildings and assets like that. And I think it's very important that people realise that we do have to have renewal, and renewal on site is much more difficult than doing a renewal on a greenfield site. So hence, to me, that is the reason for us moving here. It will enable us to do something else with the Newnham site in the future as a city. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a question with regard to the projection over Willow Street of the facade, and just wonder if the planner could just elaborate a little further with regard to what that means in terms of needing council agreement of that encroachment of the facade.
Our consultant planner, John.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the relatively minor encroachment as part of the development serves to offset and provide further amenity as part of the design and the use of Willow Street. I think it's important to understand also that Willow Street, the proposals for Willow Street include not insignificant landscaping as part of that, and pedestrian ways which will assist with movement around and ultimately through the site.
Thank you, Mayor. And the final question concerns what is the old National Automobile Museum site, which of course we still at this point own until the final transfer is triggered. I'm just wondering about the nature of the salvageable materials that are contained within that site and what opportunity exists for the reuse of them.
Thank you. Is that for you, John, or for a CEO?
Probably the General Manager.
Yeah, no, I think that's outside of the planning process in terms of being able to compel that. Certainly I know that UTAS will have thought that through, and we can certainly seek that information and have that question answered in terms of what their proposal is.
Thank you. That would be appreciated.
Yep, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. When I was elected to council, this process was already in train. It's been an interesting journey to follow the process since then, but we have to remember that, well before then, there's been a number of iterations, a number of community consultations that the university has done, gone back, made changes, and we're still in that process. At the moment, this is one stage of quite a few. No doubt it will be a boon for Launceston. There's no doubt that when building activity occurs, that will be the case. But we're not here to discuss that. No doubt it'll be an opportunity for further education, something that we already have, something that we all, I'm sure, would aspire Launceston to have. But again, not the decision that we're making today. And it is true in some ways that this race has already been run, that decisions have been made that have led us to this point. Council has offered up land as part of that process, and it's unfortunate that that land is located in a floodplain. There's various steps that council have taken to limit building activity in that floodplain, that includes, having a careful eye on what the university is planning in that area as well. It was said that Newnham at the time, maybe back in 2015, was no longer fit for purpose for the university, and that may be well true, but it's also true that the university is in the process of refitting that building for purpose, and there's a number of purposes that will be used for. So in this long journey that we've been on, I feel, and I'm sure this is reflected in the community, that there's been a number of iterations and a number of reasons that have come and gone as to why this move is taking place. Notwithstanding all of those points, because again, they don't go to the issue at hand, which is approving buildings that are located on a potential floodplain. And also in an area where Launceston faces significant congestion. I congratulate the university on the efforts that they have made to address parking issues and transport issues around the site, but it is a bit harder to address the issues that go with putting a building in a situation that can be potentially inundated by floodwaters. So I've had difficulties supporting this particular move for a long time, and yet at the same time, as I said, this began long ago. Some people are saying this race has already been run. That may be true, but we're still going to be facing now and into the future further developments that will go alongside the current developments that are taking place there. So, having said all that, I still have concerns about the move in general. When it comes to these buildings and these development applications in particular, I have concerns that we are approving something that potentially, it may be next year, it may be 5 years, it may be 50 years' time, will be in a situation where they can be potentially inundated by floodwaters. I know that the city has a lot of mitigation in place, but that does not mean that what we now call a 1 in 100-year flood might not become a 1 in 20-year flood or a 1 in 5-year flood. These are difficult predictions to make. I understand all the reasons that speakers today and councillors around the table have for supporting this move, and a lot of them are very merit-worthy notions and ideas. But at this stage, I have difficulty for the future of Launceston in supporting a move by our premier educational institution onto a floodplain. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all the speakers. A little bit different. I couldn't be more excited about today, about the future of our city. And I'd like to say a special note to Mr. Cromie for speaking and pointing out it's all about education and our future. I've got 3 young children. I know we've all around the table got children and grandchildren. And we're all here to see our future flourish. And I think one of the key words that Mr. Beach said, creating a vibrant city, and there's nothing more vibrant than having students walk into our pubs, our cafes, into our retail shops, creating inner city living, also while gaining a better education for all of us. So on the planning side of things, in regards to what we're dealing with, we're a floodplain, the whole of Launceston is a floodplain, pretty much a CBD, but we are aware of it, we are designing and we're engineering to cope with it. We can't know when it's going to rain, but we know when it does, we're prepared for it. So I'm fully confident in the design elements of the building. And from an architectural point of view, I think the building, personally, is one that we're going to be proud of. It's going to stand out. It looks funky, it looks cool, if we use those words. And it does suit what the university's trying to do there is regards to obviously the science applications to it, the sport applications to it. So I think the building itself will attract the university students. So I'll sit down now in obviously full support of the application.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, if you'd have the chair just for a minute, thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to be able to support this application, and I just want to add a few things. First of all, endorse what the speakers have said. I think they've made some very valid points and very important points, which I endorse. And as education, as other councillors said, is so important for our city. And I was privileged to go on some of the trips over to Europe, to other cities, to have a look at a city that's been transformed by a university that's come close, moved from outside, come into the city, and how that city is active and alive, and it has made a significant difference. So, whilst I'm very excited, I'm just pleased that we're here today. I'm going to be excited when it's finished and when I see the transformation. That's when I'll get excited, when this great city has people, more people around about the CBD. So very happy, and thanks for the speakers to come in to say that. We will be in the university city in some 3 to 4 years, and I think that's very pleasing. Can I also take a bit of liberty to thank the university and our staff, the CEO and our others and our planning staff that have been working hard for many, many years. And I want to include in that our working group. We've had some councillors on that working group for some time, Councillor Finlay, Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Soward, who's no longer on it, but who has been on it. Thank you for the work that you've done too in the time that you've put into that and a lot of effort. So I think there's been a real working together by that group, and I appreciate the effort that's been put in by the UTAS staff as well. Thank you for that, because that's enabled us to come to where we are. We have a building that's absolutely going to be incredible. We're going to be proud of that. It's going to be something which is going to add to the heritage of the city, not take away. It's going to add to the heritage. It's going to make our city even more pleasing for people to come and want to look at. And I can only say that I really support the design of the buildings and how that's been done. So thank you for those involved with that as well. And education is critical. In so many ways, if we want to continue to develop, become one of the great regional cities, we need to continue to raise the bar in education. And my hope and prayer is that many people that now don't even consider about going to university will start to have that thought and process. I'm very privileged that my wife and I both went to the UTAS, the old building, and I went quite a few years ago, and they were pretty old then, the buildings, so I think there's time for new modern buildings for young people to be able to go. My children have been to the older buildings as well, and I'm looking forward to be able to see the modern buildings and how people will get excited to want to go and study. So looking forward and fully endorse this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Hand the meeting back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay, wish to close.
I will briefly, thank you, Mayor, in particular speaking to this item 9.1 in regards to Willis Street and just responding positively to a couple of the comments. I think, and following on from your comments, that we should feel grateful that the university, post the challenges of COVID, retained their commitment to this development in full in Northern Tasmania. We could have found ourselves in a situation where that was wound back or there was a reconsideration of the full development. And there are only a few, and in fact perhaps in Tasmania only the University of Tasmania, that could invest in such a scale on a site to address challenges like the flood requirements, of the technicalities of delivering a development on that site. So for me, having assessed it against the planning scheme, I'm fully supportive of the motion today and grateful to the university for their ongoing commitment to this development and their capacity to invest in a development that addresses the issues that our community finds themselves in around living on a river. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? There's 2 against, the rest are 4. The motion is carried. We now move on to 9.2. We do have some speakers for 9.2. Andy Muller.
Mayor, councillors, I speak in support of the application. Across Australia, Tasmania has the lowest percentage of households with at least one tertiary degree, 18.5% versus a national average of 23.7%. This is important for our communities because research has shown that as the levels of educational attainment in a community increase, so too do individuals' quality of life, employability, earning capacity and likelihood of being financially self-sufficient beyond retirement. Relationships are longer and more harmonious and general health improves, while there are decreases in crime rates and associated imposts on policing services, requirements on the public health and welfare sectors, likelihood of future substance dependence and therefore the overall financial burden to the taxpayer. Higher standards of education are therefore linked to improved economic outcomes. To quantify this, A study by UK researcher Rick Hansishek looked at the financial impact of improving student performance measured on the OECD's Programme of International Student Assessment of 15-year-olds around the world. One country that performs poorly in this testing is Mexico. The study estimated that if they were to raise their academic achievement by just 6%, it would have a net impact of adding $5 trillion to the Mexican economy. So there will be direct benefits to our students and the community as a result of UTAS being located so prominently at Inveresk. I envisage more schools visiting UTAS and students seeing their future opportunities firsthand. Schools utilising the university's facilities for special projects and programs, students developing an attachment to UTAS and so aspiring to go there for their tertiary study. And this aspiration will lead to greater focus on their current studies and the determination of the students in our schools. And the impact of all this will snowball to raise the standard of educational attainment across the north, if not the state. Quite simply, UTAS's move to Inveresk will result in higher levels of educational attainment in the state, resulting in healthier, more inclusive and economically sustainable communities, which is what I assume we all would love to see for Launceston and Tasmania. Thank you.
Elizabeth Daly.
Apologies for my getting, I don't think I got mixed up, I think we got mixed up. Just to reiterate what I said before, I really was speaking about the Riverbend site. I just want to again talk about the destination, which I think the last speaker was alluding to. For children to grow up visiting that site and knowing what happens at a university will change the nature of their aspiration, I believe. And it's such an accessible and an inclusive place. I've worked there for 5 years in the education department. That was our office. So I know that it's a pivotal site. I wanted to just also speak about the additional benefits there will be from that building. It will be a beautiful building with lots of additional community engagement. So I just think that's a very important aspect. And I think just to say that where you study is almost as important as what you study. And I think for the people of northern Tasmania, that will become really important. And I guess if I was a student on that site, and I had part-time work, I would find it very accessible. And I think the number of occasional jobs or part-time jobs that students do in this city will make it very much easier for them. So thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Murdoch.
Good afternoon again. I am here today speaking on behalf of the Office of the Coordinator General for the application as it sits before you. In regards to this building, I think it is fair to say, and kudos to the university for taking on commentary from Heritage Tasmania. This sits very well within this precinct, adds value to the precinct, in fact, and is so sympathetic. I think the other important thing is how it also interrelates with other education on site. TASTAFE will work in with this, conversations with Big Picture School, and importantly, ongoing conversations with the Department of Education as to how this building can be accessed by all schools. And I think this is really important. What we are talking about today is actually an entire education precinct for Launceston. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people who's listed. Anyone else wish to speak? No? Thank you. Councillor Finlay is moving the motion. Deputy Mayor seconding. Councillor Finlay, wish to speak?
As Councillor Daking said earlier, he was really excited about today. I'm really excited about this development application on this site. For all of the conversations we've had about the University of Tasmania transferring down to Inveresk and why that's important, but what was important to us as a community and us as a council was always reinforced that the precinct needed to remain a community precinct where no one ever felt like they couldn't go anywhere. And so I love on a really tricky site, which is a really small part of an immense community, recreational, cultural, educational precinct, that the university has seen the opportunity to create over 6,000 square metres of teaching space on a little triangle car park with, and I would like to acknowledge the architects, John Wardle Architects, who have created a stunning solution here to not only from the outside ensure that people can be a part of what this building is going to be, but as a student, and Elizabeth and others have talked about the quality and experience of being a student in these buildings, that these buildings are so exquisitely designed that from the inside you connect to all parts of the precinct. So whether it's looking down Traversa Lane, whether it's connecting to the river, it was really once this site was being sort of evolved over time and feedback was taken on over the early phases of the development, that this site particularly, other than the bridge that will walk you over the river, it turned its sort of self to the river and looked out that way. And I think that's a really lovely solution, and again, really completes what's been tried to be created by the university here. I love the design, I love the solutions, I love how it fits in a really tight space, and differently to the first one that we've considered, 9.1, which only had 4 points of discretion, I love that the designers have worked with council and the community and taken feedback from Heritage TAS and others to ensure that with the 14 points of discretion, they have been able to deliver a development application that reasonably meets the requirements of the scheme and can deliver an outcome for students and for our community. I want to speak into the meeting, just quote a part of the report that was really important for me to read. Deeply respecting the work of Paul Davies and his connection, understanding and commitment to Launceston, particularly our heritage fabric, that the words that he speaks about this in preparing the heritage impact statement, he says that the building is well considered, sited and designed structure that not only fits within the heritage character of the precinct, but is a fine building in its own right. Key characteristics of the precinct are buildings built of their time, using the latest materials, designed for specific purposes, many well designed but utilitarian in nature, reflecting their purpose, all working within a quite rigid framework to allow access for locomotives and carriages that require rectilinear forms with clear open space. The proposed building adopts all of these characteristics with a new use that is both compatible with heritage values and actually enhances the precinct. There are no adverse heritage impacts arising from this development. For me, that was really important to receive, and I think where they've had such challenges across 14 requirements to address what we need to deliver a good development application in this space, they've delivered an exceptional outcome in tricky circumstances, and I commend the university for doing so.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to follow Councillor Finlay, and I guess at risk of getting some people in the community excited, it's not that we'll see the locomotives back coming to the River's Edge building, taking members of the public on a train track just yet. I too wish to support the application, and many of the things that Councillor Finlay had mentioned are things that I wanted to also say. Obviously, concerns have been raised, particularly with regard to flooding, and no doubt others around the table will continue that argument. But I note that the application is accompanied by a very detailed flood assessment report with the idea of mitigating the potential that flood could impact the building, and the design has been arranged to accommodate that. I also want to note, and I quote, that the industrial form and the materiality of the external surfaces reflects the cultural heritage values of the buildings on the site, and the palette reflects the character of the site. And you heard Councillor Finlay mention the work of Paul Davies, and I think that's important. I also referenced the fact that the Tasmanian Heritage Council raised no concern whatsoever with the proposal, and their comments with regard to excavation and what needs to occur if things are found are clearly documented. This new building, adjacent to the School of Architecture and Design, is one that I think has been designed beautifully in terms of its placement in the industrial site. I also like the way that it speaks to the river, and I like already the way that the existing buildings, including the Annex Theatre, are speaking to the potential of that site, having been opened up already, with the idea of students being able to easily traverse the spaces and weave themselves in around the cultural precinct. A destination, a sense of belonging, a sense of vitality, all of those things are important, but against the 14 discretions that we're being asked to consider today, this application stacks up. I commend the application to the table, and I want to thank the university for their commitment to the north, and to note again that the way that this application works in conjunction with a very alive and full, thriving arts course in the north, in the building next door.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my fellow speakers. This particular building, I guess I could take off Councillor Daking and say I'm excited about this, mainly because my daughter had 3 years from 2014 to 2016 on the Inverness site while she studied her Bachelor of Architecture. So education has been on this site since 2006. The problem that she would relay to me was that it was somewhat lonely because there wasn't enough students. And the most important part of what we are doing here is we are bringing the other students from the other campuses, from the Newnham campus down into the city. That will in itself will add the vitality that she found she missed with that original site. So it's all been said before, but look, it is a great thing. The development of the 800 place car park will help service not only this building but also the others in the precinct, such as the architecture building, and it will add so much to this city. As others have said, we need, as a city and as a state, to embrace higher education, and this will make it easier to do so, and the easier you make it for people to do so, the more likely they are to do it. And I have great happiness, I guess, or I'm not quite sure the right word there, but I really am very glad that this has happened, and I'd really like to go back to the start and perhaps thank those who are funding all this, because this is mostly funded by the federal government and in fact also funded by, as someone said, $60 million from the state government, as well as some university funding, I'm sure. But it is something that's worth $270 million to this city, and we really are to be very grateful for that, because it does transform, and it will transform our city. Like you, Mayor, I also spent some time in Europe when on holidays, and went to a city that had a new city campus for their long-time university, and the difference, our guide was in fact from that university, and she had moved from within Germany to right down to the city at the end of on the Danube, and I said, why did you do it? And she said, because of the university, and I have no intention of going back. And that is what a true destination university that we can become, and I really do hope that it becomes that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to go over too much of what's already been said, but I do want to thank the speakers for their compelling statements on the importance of education. I think it can be summed up in the simple statement that you can't be what you can't see. And for too long, there's been a real segregation between those who do have access to higher education in Launceston and those who do not. And I think that statement's been made clearly from the start of this project. I'd also like to pay tribute to former Mayor John Lees, the late John Lees. I know this vision would be something that he would be so delighted to see continuing. It was a huge risk to ever consider building in these sites, but it's been done, and it's been done to huge success, and I believe it will continue to be done to huge success. For those who are concerned about climate change and building on a floodplain, it's absolutely understandable. We're all nervous about the future. None of us can see it, but we can plan for it. We can have our best and brightest minds consider every application in a place at risk like this. So whilst in accepting this development, we're not saying that we deny climate change. We are saying we believe that the science of climate change is real, is true, and is tested, and we are now planning for that. And I think it's a very, very important distinction between denying climate change and accepting the reality and moving forward as a community. We cannot let the problems that are going to face us in the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years stop human development. And I believe this is a vote of confidence for that very idea. So I will be supporting this today.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Question, Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll just ask either the CEO or our planning department, if I owned a block of land on our flood inundation zone, what exactly would I be allowed to build on that block of land?
Richard.
The flood inundation provisions are a code that overlay a whole series of zones. So there's residential, commercial, community purpose, industrial zones.
Then I'll just clarify, let's say it's zoned residential.
In the flood provisions are divided up into different precincts with different characteristics. So in some precincts, there is the full range of residential uses are available. In other precincts, single dwellings are allowable, multiple dwellings are not allowable, and in any case, the floor levels have to meet the required levels set in the building code.
Thank you. Meaning the floor level has to be above?
In all cases, the floor level has to be above the nominated floor level for residential or sensitive, habitable rooms, I think is the phrase. And that comes from the Building Act, not the planning scheme, although the planning scheme reinforces it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I really do appreciate this discussion, and I know this is a discussion that our whole city has had for the last 5 years or so. And I do appreciate those that argue that this move to a more central location for the university is a positive thing for our city. I accept that completely. It doesn't mean I have to accept it in this particular location. In fact, I accept that so strongly that I disagree with the state government at the moment selling a TAFE building in Wellington Street.
Yeah, can we make sure we stick to the DA, please?
It certainly is. If the topic is that central education in Launceston is...
No, the topic is this DA, whether it's appropriate for the...
Yes, and part of the arguments for that have been that centralising education...
That's not what we're considering
in
today.
our CBD will bring a benefit, and I agree it does. And likewise, I agree that would be the same with TAFE. The design attributes, I agree, the university has put extraordinary work into that, and they'll no doubt, if they are built, be a great contribution to our city. I have no problems with its interaction with the heritage aspects at Invermay, at Inveresk. I do note that this land was gifted to the council by the state government in the late 1990s under the provision of recreation and cultural activities. That might no longer be a current guide to the use of this land, but it certainly has been a guide to the use of this land up until this point. And recreation activities especially are something that, is probably less concerning when it comes to being in, a flood-prone zone. It's difficult because we do not have a lot of land available close to the CBD. We have a congested CBD, certainly for the size of our city, just because of the mere geography of our town, of our city. So, having said all that, a lot of those arguments are completely understandable. The arguments about the importance of education, no one would disagree, least of all me. I too was educated at the university campus in Newnham, and I appreciate having that opportunity, and I'd love to see that opportunity shared further and wider. My problem is with the long-term future of our city, our vulnerability to flooding, which is all too apparent, which is something, of course, the city has made its best efforts to address. It doesn't mean that this particular land in a flood-prone area is suitable for the development of a university. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to the Planning Department. Is there any aspect to this development application that's residential at all?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, there is not.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer. Oh, you want to speak? Oh, Councillor Spencer first.
Thanks, Mayor. There's no doubt in the next 50, 100, 150 years this will flood. This is my main concern, and hopefully no students die from it. I just hope not. I love education, I love industry, and this is not probably the right location for it. That's my main concern. With climate change, they reckon the water's going to rise 800 to 900 mil in the next 50, 80 years at low head. That will affect this in floods. We've had floods in 29, 69, and it will happen again. So it's a wrong location for it. So I cannot support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose just to wrap up before Councillor Finlay does. A statement that really, I hope I get this right, Councillor Dawkins. It's hard to believe if you can't see. Is that what you said?
You can't
believe you can't see. See, I knew I wouldn't get it right.
We'll educate you.
Thank you. I need to go to university. I haven't finished university. Those words really resonated with me. Obviously, I couldn't remember them.
We all do differently.
But we all do, Alan. And look, I did say that the last building on Willow Street was cool and funky. This one's just simply amazing. The old adage, build it and they will come. Well, I think we're going there before we've built it. So congratulations to the uni, and I look forward to it being built.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, if you'd have the floor. I just want to say that something it is in a floodplain, but you've got to remember we've reviewed that, and what we've decided as a council, and part of it is that education is allowed in that area. Education is clearly allowed in that area. Residential is not. There are restrictions, as the question has said, but this is not residential. This is about education, and clearly that is allowed. It's been one of those things that's been allowed. It's been in the area for quite some time. And then there are other people trying to say that the building might collapse. I think a word was said. Well, I know buildings not too far from where we're building on the Invermay plain that have been there for hundreds of years. I know a building, in fact, from 1960, the silos were there, just been strengthened. But the silos has been there for a long time. I haven't seen that collapse. That's been there for 50 years. So I think we need to be careful with the words we use. The buildings in the area, for anybody that's listening to this remote, they are very safe and they've been built to the right criteria. And these will be safe and built to the right criteria. Our QV mag is down there, well built, and that's going to stay there. It's not going to collapse and fall on somebody. So let's not get the fear going out in our community, because it's completely wrong. This is about a building which has been fully designed to fit into the landscape with the heritage. It's fully in character with the region and the area, and it's also, to me, going to add to our culture, as we said before, and I agree with all the other comments that have been made before, and I think it's extremely positive for our city, and really looking forward not just to the start, but to the completion and when it's full of people. Thank you.
Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay, wish to close.
I do, thanks, Mayor. And as Councillor Walker said, it's great to have everybody sort of participating and having conversations and asking questions and making contributions to these debates, because it's actually how over the last 4 years we've got to such strong and positive results. There has been a lot of tension in the conversation with the community, with the council, with the university, with other members of the conversation. I think it's a really positive tension that concerns are raised, that responses are provided, that working together, collaboration occurs to ensure that we get the best possible outcomes for what is a generational investment to transform not only Launceston but northern Tasmania. And in doing that, acknowledging that the vote on the previous item was we're only 11, so it was probably 9-2. I want to speak to a couple of our councillors to sort of contemplate position on this around flood. I think it's really important that we take our concerns seriously and that we're in a conversation around what it actually means. At the moment, the development application before us is a car park. It's a flat piece of land that takes cars sometimes, wasn't always full, but it didn't have another purpose. It's just the land that is asphalt. The Flood Authority and the levies have been sort of in play in Launceston for decades and have been assessed and reinforced and designed and engineered to the point that we have decided as a Tasmanian community, what the accepted level of risk is for our community. But more so than that, Launceston, previously under the sort of guidance of Vary Vote or Bev Allen or other people that we've had in our sort of like flood response, flood recovery, flood management, with all of our teams here working with lots of different agencies in northern Tasmania, we know that it doesn't rain and the tides aren't high and 30 seconds later we've got water everywhere and people are at risk. We know that the intricate and complex nature of our river system, certain things have to happen at certain times. What I'm fascinated by about the catchment that occurs to cause a flood is that the catchment of this area is like from Tunbridge to the east coast of Deloraine. It's ridiculous. So for the water to get into that and then have an impact, we actually have done desktop studies year on year, time through the year for decades to ensure that we are best prepared to know what to do to protect our people. Because what we actually seek to do in a flood is to protect people, and we assess the risk to people. And so we have said in certain areas under residential requirements in precincts in the flood inundation zone, you can do certain things in certain areas. We know how long it's going to take to get people out of this area to ensure that your lives aren't at risk. And so on this site, people aren't going to live there. So people might attend this site for university from time to time. And if we're at the point where our levees are going to spill, we will have adequate time to protect and look after our people to ensure that, unlike the 29s and the 60 floods where the levees and the protections were different and our ability to respond were different, means that people aren't at risk, and we've addressed that. And I think that this development on this site is reasonable to protect the risk of our people and to develop a great building for the university.
Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's the 2 against, the rest are 4. The motion is carried. We now move on to 9.3, 13 Como Crescent. We do have a number of speakers for Como Crescent. First, Pat Corkery.
Good afternoon, Mr Mayor, councillors. I've just rewritten what I was going to say because I think that the other speakers probably would have covered most of my points. I'd just like to say that had I not resigned, I'd have been working for 11 of you aldermen. I began employment at the tail end of amalgamation when council was in chaos and worked for the town clerk until Peter Jordan arrived. From then I worked for Peter and 11 aldermen under the leadership of 4 mayors, and it was, if not written law, then custom, the DAs were considered individually, and the overriding consideration was, and I quote, "No resident shall build a structure which will impede the amenity of a neighbour. This structure will not only impede but destroy that amenity. The planning scheme is seriously flawed. 3 hours of sunlight is way too restricted when it's in the early morning. There will be no time for frosts to melt before the next one arrives. This could be every day from late May until sometime in September." Jimmy Siniglu, his byword was, "Every ratepayer should get $1 worth of value for every dollar of rates paid." And we worked for that, as did mayors who succeeded him. The value of 65 years' rates now hangs in the balance and could be taken away in favour of a resident who has not even lived there long enough to pay rates, and just simply for their profit. I believe that they will sell both those properties when they don't get any tax stuff. The ticks. Thank you.
John Corkery.
Thank you, Mayor and members. John Corkery. I'm a part owner at 15 Como Crescent. I'm opposed to the development at 13 Como Crescent. When this area was first set out, we had substantial backyards in the Newstead area. All, or most of them, similar size to 13 Como Crescent. And they used for various reasons, some of which were family entertainment areas, safe places for your family to play, but mainly for gardens and vegetable gardens. Now, I'm not opposed to development or people making a quid. What I am opposed to is a development that would detract and overshadow your neighbour's property. And I believe this development will. It takes up 90% of the area. It's got its 2-storey wall, 1.6 metres from my side fence. I don't think we have to be like Hong Kong, where we've got to develop every available area in the neighbourhood. And if this application's approved, a precedent will be set. As I said before, there's plenty of blocks the same size as 13 Como Crescent. I'll give you an example. My other neighbour, her property is smaller and can't be developed, but the two properties on either side have better access and larger backyard areas than 13 Como Crescent. So she could actually, if in hindsight, be built out. Okay, thank you.
Peter Corkery.
Good afternoon. I live at 15 Como Crescent with my dad and my young daughter. She's the 4th generation that has lived in this house. The hours of sunlight that is depicted that we're going to be getting, I won't be getting my washing dry. The sun won't be out when I come home from work, which I finish work early. We love our backyard. My dad is an avid gardener and always has been. We hardly buy a vegetable. We're very lucky. He's 81 and the fittest 81 person I know. He can still go fishing and shooting with men in their 50s. He has this lifestyle and his health because of what he grows to eat. I don't want that taken away from him, so he's sitting in his chair in his 80s and not being fit and healthy. I want vitamin D, exercise and mental health for my dad and for us. He also could live until he's 100. Most of his family have lived until their late 90s. We have the intention of staying with Dad. I would like to be able to buy the house from he and his brothers. However, I think the value will diminish, which wouldn't benefit us down the track. And also, why would I want to buy a house that we've had for 65 years if we're not going to have the lifestyle that we've grown to love and be able to continue for further generations in that home? I would ask that you didn't put up this house, which would be a strata title, to make it just more difficult with access and all of those things. Appreciate your time.
Yep, thank you. Barry Corkery.
Mayor, Alderman, I object to the proposal at 13 Como Crescent. I live at number 15. 90% of my life I've had a beautiful garden, which I've had there for that long. As I don't know of any vegetable that will grow with at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight per day, that side of the garden will be finished. Now, despite the winter frost on the ground, when it comes out sunny now, it's gone by 10 because we live on the flat, close to the river. We get a very heavy frost. Then those frosts will be there until perhaps 12, and then winter may not lift. Now, homes been now possession for 65 years. And I don't think the standard of living should be altered by somebody moving in and making a profit for the building. They have 3 lovely kids, 6, 4 and 2. They'll have nowhere to play, so they'll only be on selling later. What do I do here? It seems ironic that middle of night week, there was so much talk about returning the land to the Aboriginals. And you are allowing a building to go ahead and encroach on our boundary with a family, Aboriginal family heritage, Dalrymple, through the Johnson line. I urge you to reject this proposal.
Thank you. Brian Kahn.
Mr Mayor and Alderman, the writer can recall when the then council put the area of Penquite Road and Como Crescent into a closed residential area. The then city architect had a sensible approach in protecting the amenity of the area, i.e. Coles had paid an exorbitant price for the Kmart land and Newstead Shopping Centre was restricted in development, i.e. village atmosphere. He was a forward-thinking person, Wally Clement. 1 to 5 Penquite Road was to lose its business zoning. However, the failure to advertise in the Herald Sun resulted in ExxonMobil sending a QC from Melbourne. Council had to adjourn meeting in the morning and reconvene in the afternoon. Sensible compromise was made and only professional rooms, i.e. doctors, dentists, between 5 and Como Crescent. This has resulted in a sensible development. As Alderman Cleaver said at the time, they could build over their premises and still retain their backyards. Having a city architect, issues were resolved before coming to council, i.e. 3, 5 and 6 Como Crescent are tested to this. 14A in my opinion, would not have met the criteria he applied. Because of discretionary use, this responsibility now falls on you, the Alderman, and places you in an invidious position having to decide and destroy the livable amenity of the area, increasing the density of living and its inherent problems. Nearest recreation facility is in Abbey Road opposite St Giles. In NAIDOC week, the resident of 15 Como Crescent who loves his cultural heritage of being close to the land, gardening, fishing, hunting, etc., has been restricted to 3 to 4 maximum light hours per day. And I think it's a very, very serious thing when we're taking somebody's recreation away. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Belinda Tipper.
Thank you, Mayor. I live 2 doors down from this proposal. I've lived there for 20 years and I object this proposal. It'll impact the traffic. We've got speed bumps have been installed in our street, which is a 25k zone. And recently we have had one side just an exit to decrease traffic. I'm not very good at speaking, sorry. Across the street from me was has been a 1 strata title. Across the street was approved and it's out of character with our street. I understand it shouldn't have been approved, and with this I would urge this elapse in judgment not to be approved for 13 Como Crescent. We brought in this street for a quiet quality of life and we're going to live there for the rest of our life. On a personal note, I think it's very unfair for my neighbour.
with his garden. I've been there for 20 years and I see him every day in his garden gardening. And I just think to take that away from someone that's been doing it for so long is very unfair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Evans.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity. Look, I listen and I note and respect the representations of the family and friends of the people at 15 Como Crescent, but I'm here to represent the proponent, Mr Elliott, and his wife and 3 young children, and I've been commissioned by them to do the submission. I heard as an earlier speaker said that she deems it, and as many do, a flawed planning scheme. Unfortunately, it's the one we work with, and that's what we've got to work with, and that's the way I've designed this house. I've responded in full to all aspects of the inner residential development standards for the Launceston interim planning scheme, and that's in that document. But as I summarise the 2 areas, as I've read all the representations, the 2 areas that I think we need to look at, or to summarise the main concerns seem to be with loss of amenity, in other words, shadowing of the property on the south and 15 Como Crescent, is the overshadowing under 11.4.3. And the other one is loss of public amenity, loss of privacy issues under 11.4.5. As I refer to this document and also the planning submission we made in regard to that, on page P08, which is the shadow diagrams, I think clearly shows that, first of all, there's no overshadowing of the existing house at 15 other than the existing house at 13. The new proposal won't overshadow the actual house itself. However, the overshadowing does come into play, as is shown on that shadow diagram, into the private open space or backyard of segments of the backyard of 15 Como Crescent for the hours between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. on the 21st of June.
Yep, thank you. Your time is up as well. Thank you. Now, Donald Corkery. I noticed that lives at 2 Reed Street in Westbury. Are you happy for him to speak, councillors? Yep, thank you. Donald Corkery.
Mayor Alderman, thank you. I'm a 3rd share owner in the 15 Como Crescent, and with the shadow forecasting over the property and through winter, I think the frost won't lift from the ground if there is any early morning cloud over the east. These frosts could last all day and for several days, which is going to affect the backyard of our property, and I don't think this is going to be fair. I'd have no objections to a single-storey development being put there, because I don't think, being 1.6 metres from our boundary fence, this is not giving a lot of leeway as far as anything for that property. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Doyle.
Good afternoon. I am the aftermath. In 2014, the same thing happened to my property. Now I don't have any back garden at all without my neighbours looking down on me. The fence was broken and all the materials were brought in to build this double-storey box on box that looked over my whole garden. The plans were arranged that my personal space was in front of my garage, and if anybody gets their kid off in their driveway in summertime, would probably not like to do it because everybody can see you. To this day, my fence is still broken. Nothing's done about it. To this day, I still have no privacy in my garden, and I don't even bother to go out there anymore. So I'd like actually the council to reconsider that this is just out of Ord. This is a beautiful street, and I know all my neighbours, and I care for them very, very much. And I want the best outcome in the future when growing families move and other people come in. I don't know what I'm going to deal with in the future, but I'd like to keep it as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have. Are there any other speakers? Thank you. So we're at 9.3. Do we have a mover for a motion? Councillor Harris, as is. Seconded, Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
Yes, I think, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the speakers about this. This is undoubtedly one of the tougher development applications that we will have to look at when we have such impassioned speakers speaking against it. Unfortunately, with this particular DA, the planner, well, I guess from the speaker's point of view, who have already spoken against it, when Mark Evans did his plans, he did a very good job of meeting the planning scheme. There are, in fact, just 3 small discretions for us to have to consider, and that is the location of the car parking, the road access and junction, that is a second crossover, and the fact that this particular development is discretionary, but I note that it is actually zoned in a residential zoning. And in a residential zoning requires discretionary use if you wish to increase the density, but it does in fact support under the planning scheme up to 40% of the properties in a street to have increased property density. So that is the first 40% of the blocks who put their hand up quick enough to develop a second house in the backyard is allowable under our planning scheme. We aren't here today to debate the merits of the inner residential planning scheme for Como Crescent. We are here today to discuss a development application that meets the current guidelines. And unfortunately for the Corkeries, I think that's how you say the name, they will be impacted by the fact that there will be a 2-storey house next door. All of us would probably be much happier if in fact it was a 1-storey house, but the realities of life today says that if you're going to develop a house and you want to put a 2-car garage and 3 bedrooms, to build that on a 300 square metre plot of land means you must go 2 storeys. And so we must make our decision based on what we've got in front of us today. It is a tough one, there's no doubt about it, but we are here to make a decision, and I'll be supporting this application today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I would like to acknowledge all of those who came and spoke today, as well as those who contacted us in the lead up to this item. Mr Mayor, I'd like to start, as I often do, with developments like this, where I always look at the representations we've received when we work our way through the report and deal with those, because I think, Mr Mayor, experience shows us that sometimes angst is created and added to when people don't always understand what we do and we sit as a planning authority. So I just want to touch on a couple of things in my remarks. The one that often crops up in items like this is the value, the fact that if we approve the application before us, it devalues the existing property. I think that crops up all the time. So for every house we build in Launceston, every other house in Launceston must be devalued, and that's obviously not the case. And when we sit as a planning authority, that's not what our remit is. So, you know, whilst I understand the passion and the angst and concern, particularly for such a long-owned property as this one is, that's not part of our consideration today. There's been mention in the submissions around the fact that it's been in the same family for a long time, the rates have been paid for a long time, and all of those things are very important and obviously say a lot about that family's commitment to the area and to the city, but again, it's not a planning consideration. So, you know, that's not something that we weigh up. It was mentioned in the submission as well about approving things in that it ticks the boxes. Well, as Councillor Harris said in his remarks, Mr Evans's proposal that he's put to us has been very, very well put together. And I think, as Councillor Harris said, there may have been 3 instances in that whole application, only 3, where performance criteria were relied on. So Mr Evans and his team have obviously put a lot of time into making sure that complies with the scheme. Mr Mayor, in I guess sharing my thoughts on this, I'm going to focus on something which seems in recent times to be more of an issue, if you will, that comes to us at Council. And it's not necessarily our place today around this table to deal with this particular issue, but one that regularly crops up, and that is the issue of shadowing and overshadowing and those sorts of things. As Mr Evans quite rightly put in the diagrams that him and his team have prepared, the condition, if you will, of the hours of sunlight have been met. But what I'm thinking, Mr Mayor, in the times in which we live now, where people are at home at different hours, people are coming and going at different times, work, in inverted commas if we want to call it that, operates differently than it did some years ago. So I'm wondering if that's not the reason why this is creating this extra angst for us to deal with as a planning authority. I think probably the last 3 or 4 meetings there's been something similar, not the same, but similar for us to consider. I have a huge amount of empathy with the family, and particularly the passion that goes into the gardening and the concern that the impact of the lack of sun that we'll have on that garden. It makes me really sad that we're, I guess, being put in a position where, that is such a heartfelt consideration. The fact that if that sunlight is impacted upon, and as the property owner mentioned, who is an avid gardener, he talked about the importance of the correct amount of sun at the right times of day and all those sorts of things. So I'll be very interested, Mr Mayor, to hear the rest of the conversation and the contributions from other councillors. But it's a tricky one for me in that, again, as I noted in my remarks, other than 3 examples of where it relies on performance criteria, the development before us complies. That's counterbalanced to me, Mr Mayor, by the very real thing that I hold dear, and I'm sure other councillors and many in our community hold dear, the fact of being a member of a community and being able to use that space around your home to provide you with enjoyment. There's no doubt that gardening and growing vegetables, not just from the healthy component of what you eat, but also that mental health opportunity. And, as Mr Corkery and others said, that provides a great outlet for people. And one of the things we've learnt during the pandemic, Mr Mayor, more than ever, is the importance of mental health.
Thank you, Councillor Stout. Your time's up. You need an extension?
Please, thank you.
Check. Seconded, Councillor Dakin. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thanks,
Mr Mayor. The thing that's been brought home to us in the pandemic is the importance of being able to get outside. Being able to get outside, get some fresh air and do something. And again, looking at information that's come to us from across the country, there's, again, I think it's inarguable, is the fact that people's mental health is diminished when they're not able to get out and enjoy the amenity of their property and the neighbouring surrounds of that property. In this instance, we've got, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying, an older gentleman who relies very heavily on this for his own mental health as well as feeding his family, which is a very admirable quality. So I'll be interested to hear the rest of the conversation, notwithstanding, as I said, the application before us from Mr Evans is obviously at a very high standard. It meets what it needs to meet. But as I said, I'm also cognizant of the need of the residents and the concerns they have for being able to enjoy their property, do their gardening, get that mental health benefit as well as that healthy ability to provide and feed your family and extended family. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this is obviously a heart versus head conversation, and I want to start by saying that I take really seriously my role as a member of the Planning Authority and really seriously the interrogation required of all DAs that come to us around the table. I also, though, value community, and I appreciate contributions to community, and by anyone's standards, 65 years is a long time to live in a residence and to have continual ownership. I also want to note that coming into today's council meeting that, to my knowledge, no one has requested the planners to develop an alternate motion, meaning that the planning grounds for refusal coming into this meeting were not something that any member of the table had considered a priority. I think that the conversations that have been raised by all of the speakers are conversations about the way that the planning scheme deals with amenity and particularly deals with the provision of sunlight. I know that the garden at number 15 is absolutely amazing. I know that when I see Ms Cockery or Mr Khan, that they will be unhappy with me not supporting the case that they want to refuse this application. But I also believe that in terms of good governance, there is absolutely no defendable reason why this particular DA should be refused. It's one of the simplest, most clean-cut DAs that have come before us. It's clear, it's systematic, it ticks all of the boxes except for the 3 that rely on performance criteria, and even those are well dealt with. This is an unfortunate situation where we are being asked to consider a heart response or a head response. This is about people who have lived in the same home for 65 years, and that is a hard decision for us to be able to ask. But the interim planning scheme sets out the reasons and the assessment tools for how we assess this particular DA. And as you look through it, it complies, it complies, it complies, it complies. So the proposal for an additional dwelling at 13 Como Crescent has to be supported. And I apologise for that, but it has to be supported.
Thank you, Deputy. Councillor Walker has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could draw our planner's attention to page 24 of the associated plans that were exhibited, the documents, and it is indeed the shadow diagram. You'll have to guide me through it a little. It's a shadow diagram of the effects of this of shading on the 21st of June, which is the standard sort of process with these matters. Now, I'm not sure of the exact degree of winter sunlight, but I'm thinking that it's around about 37 degrees or 36 degrees in the middle of winter. I'm not sure exactly on that. I'd be happy to be corrected on that. But when I look at these shadow diagrams and I see the shadow from the new proposed development at 9 a.m, it's a long shadow that just touches the existing neighbour's building. But then when we get to 11 a.m. and 1 p.m, the shadow lines seem to retract almost, within, I don't know, you'd say maybe a metre or a metre and a half of a 6-metre building. And then when we go out to 3 p.m, all of a sudden the backyard is probably mostly covered, and then at 4 p.m, the shadows have stretched extremely far out. What I'm having difficulty with is understanding how, in the middle of winter, the sun is represented from a 6-metre building to appear as though it only casts maybe a 2-metre shadow. Is that correct? I mean,
Thank you.
Seems, yeah.
Yep, we'll get the question answered.
Thank you, Councillor. So I did have a review of the shadow diagrams. I requested them from both the applicant and we got internal staff member to do the shadow diagrams as well. Because it meets the acceptable solutions, so there was a little bit of a discretion, very minor. Because it meets the acceptable solutions, the shadow diagrams didn't need to be pursued, in my opinion. So I didn't request any further information. I didn't request any further expense from the applicant to justify the shadow diagrams because, as again, it meets the acceptable solutions for building height and setback. So overshadowing wasn't assessed.
Follow-up question, Councillor Moore?
Well, I suppose my question generally then, that I'm looking at this shadow diagram as part of my process of assessing this development application.
Yeah, are you speaking or asking a question again?
No, I'm asking a question. Thank you, Mayor.
Just checking.
I'll start again. I'm looking at this shadow diagram that's provided to me as part of the development application process in order to help make my decisions, and I'm concerned that the representation here, where the shadow seems to retreat to within a couple of metres of a 6-metre building, is purely not possible in the middle of winter, and I'm wondering whether other councillors share those concerns.
Thank you. Richard, you wish to add anything? No?
No, these are in-house ones. If you want to look at them.
So in terms of this diagram, which is in the agenda, there's a number of coloured lines. So you don't need the principle of how the lines move across the map explained. You're asking that you don't believe the yellow and blue lines are representative of what the shadows might be. Is that the question?
Quite simply, normally when a shadow moves, the furthest point travels in a straight line, just as the sun travels in a straight line. When we look at these diagrams, the furthest point of the shadow seems to retract markedly towards the 6-metre building and then divert out away from the building again, creating an ellipsis rather than a straight line.
I think one of the issues with this is that the two colours, pink and purple, look similar in the diagrams, but if you start with the red and then you move across through the yellow, the blue, the green, and then into the purple, the longer shadows clearly are the ones that are later in the afternoon. I think what you're suggesting is that the yellow and blue don't represent where they might be. Yeah, that's correct.
If I might,
not only do they...
If I might please answer the question from my perspective. So obviously the shade diagrams are worked out through extensive modelling, which is commonly provided and delivered through drafters and architects. So what I heard our town planner say is that we had the shade diagrams verified by our own. We have software in-house that can model the requirements in terms of where the shadows on that particular day that the planning scheme requires. And as I understand it, it was within the parameters or within close accuracy to what was submitted. So it was determined that it is compliant in terms of the model that all architects and draftsmen sort of work by. So I mean, I think in terms of the validity of what we've got, we have to accept that it is valid and that it is an accurate representation of how the shade will perform throughout that day as required by the planning scheme. So, and there's nothing that I've heard today that would cause that to suggest that it's not accurate. So,
if I could just add one thing to that, and can I add one thing to that, which is just to reinforce the point that if the building is inside the allowable building envelope, that whatever shadow that throws is deemed to comply with the planning scheme. If the building is compliant inside the envelope, the shadows by extension are compliant.
Thank you. Any further? Another question? Or no? Do you wish to speak? Councillor Walker?
I do, thank you, Mayor. No, I don't think there's any other questions. I think it's patently obvious, if you understand a little bit about the actual celestial movement of bodies, that this shadow diagram is incorrect. Now, I understand also from the planner's side that in actual fact, in this case, the building proposes inside the allowable envelope, and therefore the shadowing doesn't impact the decision. I also understand that primarily we're talking about shadow loss for the building on that block rather than the yard of that block, and so in that case it's of less relevance. My concern was, of course, that I'm looking at a diagram that, to my mind, and no one has yet convinced me otherwise, is patently incorrect. I think that Launceston has a problem on its hands when it comes to the continued sort of infill development that we are seeing in suburban backyards. We are facing more and more decisions like this. I feel as though there's been more and more in my very short time on council, and they tend to always be the most difficult decision for councillors. And the reasons are quite simple, that people are used to their amenity, they bought their house with that amenity in mind, and now that amenity is changing. You know, whether or not it's in the planning scheme that someone's garden should receive a certain amount of sunlight or not is another matter. I fully sympathise with people who find themselves in this situation. And I think we will face more and more of these decisions. It seems to be the only game in town. If you own a property and you wish to capitalise on that, of course it makes sense. If you can subdivide, if you can afford to build, then you stand to make significant gains in that process. But that only means that we will face these decisions more and more. And as one of the representatives said, a single story would have been most acceptable in this situation. It would have meant that we wouldn't have had these representations and we wouldn't have such a difficult decision on our hands. But how do we as a council encourage one owner to develop in such a way as it doesn't impede upon another? It's just not in the planning scheme. And as Councillor Harris also speaks of, under the general residential zoning, the inner residential zoning. Oh yeah, there's almost like a gold rush on, because we will allow a certain amount, up to 40% in an area before we close the gate. So it's like there's a gold rush on to value add capital to your investment before someone else does. And that's problematic too. But when we get to this specific development, we're told that there are no great areas where it exceeds the planning scheme, fits within the building envelope. You know, it might have been nice to think that this building could have been located in the other corner of the rear yard, meaning that the shadowing would have been far less. But where do we have the mechanism that allows that discussion to take place? So, having said all that, I would like to think that there is a way that we can move forward as a council, because we're only going to be faced with these decisions more and more often. I don't certainly, point the finger in any direction. This is not the fault of anyone. It's the reality of what we're living now, coming from a time when people had their quarter-acre block and expected full amenity with that, and we're moving into a time where there is more pressure on limited space, and also more opportunities for people to develop in areas that they previously wouldn't. They're all issues I'm sure everyone around this table has discussed and has thought about, but now I have to sit down and have a last look at this and find I'm waiting, to hear from other councillors to hear a good reason why we should remove this amenity from 13 Como Crescent. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Finlay, take up your right, or your right? No, because you're reserved, I thought. No. Councillor Harris, you wish to close?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will. And I was intrigued by Councillor Walker's questions, and I look at the shadows created by the single-storey house that exists at number 13 Como, how it covers not only the house at number 15, but in fact would extend right across the yard on the 21st of June. Of course, that is the worst day. That's why we picked the 21st of June. The sun is in its lowest. Other than that, it only gets better either side of it. You get more sun. If in fact the house as proposed was in fact a single story, looking at those shadow lines, it would appear that that would also shadow all of his backyard. So, in fact, we have a two-storey development rather than a one-storey. It simply means it shadows a much longer shadow, not only across number 15's backyard, but in fact probably into the block at St Michael's behind. I live in a two-storey house in a row of 3 two-storey houses. I have a rear deck, the other 2 houses do not. That allows me to look in my neighbours' yards if I like. I don't. I couldn't tell you what actually they do in their yards. Thankfully, this development does not allow that. This development has bedroom windows that's 1.7 metres high along that fence. So the privacy of number 15 will be maintained. If you're wondering how high 1.7 metres is, it's about above my eye line. So I'd have to stand on tippy toes to even try to look out a window. So the reality is people's privacy by this development, and again we have said about Mr Evans, he has done a good development application for this particular block. He has met the planning scheme. It is... Look, it is still a tough one. As Councillor Gibson said, our role as a planning authority is that we must take it seriously, and if we apply good governance, it must be supported. And I think it is very much a heart versus head response that people will vote on today. So we'll see how many hard-headed ones there are versus their heart. I do congratulate Mr Corkery for his garden. His garden will still get sun. The sun will still come up in the morning. He may have to move some garden beds from one side of the yard to the other in the next 12 months to perhaps make better use of the sun that comes out of the thing. But at this time of year, his backyard will in fact be bathed in sunshine virtually all day. So with that, I would ask you all to support this development application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's 2 against, the rest are 4. The motion is carried. 9.4. We have some speakers for 9.4. Susan Henshaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors.
You're a little bit closer to the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I grew up in Trevellyn and I love our neighbourhood and the community we've built there. I've lived in the suburb for over half my life. I'm strongly against the proposed new dwelling being built in its current form. The siting and scale of a dwelling must not cause unreasonable loss of amenity. This proposed development will cause severe loss of amenity as well as privacy. The 25 square metre deck being located just a few millimetres off my boundary is not consistent at all with that of existing dwellings on established properties in the area. In terms of setbacks and building envelope, I disagree that it is consistent with this because the deck is intended to be private, open space directly accessible from the living area, meaning a continuation of the overall living space, means it's actually not providing reasonably consistent separation between adjacent dwellings. My question is, why should it be approved when it's unreasonably close to my boundary as well as being imposing? Why can't it be lowered and relocated on the site to a position and design that is more in keeping with the existing dwellings and won't have such a negative impact on surroundings? One of your values as a council is you strive towards the best outcome for the community. Surely there must be a more prudent and feasible alternative where we all win. It's only fair it be a win-win situation for everyone involved. I simply want to continue to love where I'm living and enjoy my private space, both inside and outside, without feeling so vulnerable and exposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Barnes.
Hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at today's council meeting. We live along the rear boundary of the proposed development. We strongly oppose the proposed new dwelling at 28 Denman Road. Our concern is that the new dwelling is outside of the building envelope, and the new house will have a 5-metre high wall at the lowest point, only 2.3 metres from our boundary. This will have a massive impact on our amenity, given the bulk and scale of the rear of the proposed dwelling. The wall is 8.7 metres long and directly faces our main kitchen window, resulting in overshadowing. This does not comply with the planning requirement of a minimal visual impact when viewed from an adjoining lot. In today's agenda, it states that our kitchen and house sit on a north-south axis, when actually the orientation of our kitchen, dining room, and outdoor living space is east-west and will directly face the rear of this proposed dwelling. The outdoor area of our home of our house is an extension of our home and a much-loved and frequently used space. The imposing nature of a 2-story house so close to our boundary will have a massive impact on us. The sheer scale, bulk, and proportions of the proposed property are what we oppose, and the imposing nature of what that this will have. The proposed property will greatly impact the morning sun, especially in winter, which we so enjoy at our house. I strongly disagree that these plans are consistent with the planning scheme, and this proposal will have a huge impact on our living space. We would also like to acknowledge that there has been no negotiation with the developers. Surely there would have been a feasible alternative that would work for everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Cole Edwards.
Good afternoon, speakers. Alderman and Mayor. I'm Cole Edwards. I'm in favour of the development. I actually lived at number 24 Denman Road for 25 years, so I'm very, very familiar with Trevellyn and its location, and very sympathetic for the area. But I want to point out how, with this, we want to do up the house that's there. It's a small house. It needs total fixing up because it wasn't built properly in the first place, and what that's going to do is inject some serious money into it. The townhouse we've proposed at the back is going to be a quality townhouse that our son's the builder, and I'll be overseeing all of that. We're very mindful of sunlight and views and all that sort of thing, people's privacy, the neighbours and that sort of thing. That's why we've got the privacy screens at 1.7 and are happy to make them higher if needed. The property that backs onto the property on the western side has only got one small window, and on the northern side too, this is on the new development, we're happy to have frosted glass to maintain as much privacy as possible. We will be managing the property through harcourts. We are very mindful of people's peace and quiet, and we want that to continue. But again, it's modern living. It's what today is all about. So we're happy to work in with the neighbours where we can. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have. Are there any other speakers? No, thank you. So we have item 9.4. Deputy Mayor, you wish to move a motion?
Mayor, I stand to move an alternate motion.
Thank you. And that is?
The motion reads that in accordance with sections 51 and 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Launceston Interim Planning Scheme 2015, a permit be refused for DA 0543-2020 residential demolition of an outbuilding, construction of alterations and additions to existing dwelling and a new dwelling at 28 Denman Road, Trevellyn on the following grounds. Clause 10.4.2, setbacks and building envelope for all dwellings. The proposed addition will cause unreasonable visual impact when viewed from the adjoining properties, causing an unreasonable loss of amenity. And B, the separation between the proposed dwelling and dwellings on adjoining lots is not considered compatible with the surrounding area.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Finlay. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak?
Mayor, just briefly, of course we assess each DA on its own merits, and whilst I certainly appreciate the comments just made now from the developer, the sheer size and scale of what is proposed and contained within the plans and the impact and loss that this causes for adjoining neighbours is quite frankly just not compatible with the scheme, not compatible with the surrounding area, and should be refused, with a view of noting, as I'm sure the neighbours do, that development is going to occur on that block and is encouraged to occur, but development that is consistent with ensuring that grounds of amenity are considered for all.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor? Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Whilst I did, as Councillor Gibson said, each application is supported, is assessed separately. Obviously, some people would look at 13 Como and say, how could you support that? And then look at this one and say, how could you not support it? The reality is this particular application pushes 1.7 metres, there's that height again, into the 4 metre setback off the back fence. And as such, when I looked at the plans of why that was necessary to build such a large building, 2 storeys high, 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage, required that to happen. If not, they would have bedrooms that were about 5 foot wide. So the reality is this is probably not a suitable development for that site. A single-storey development would probably be much better received and not have so much impact, particularly on the rear neighbour. But I would also like to make sure that they did not come into that 4 metre exclusion zone off the back fence. So whilst I do like to support development applications where I can, I think in this case I will refuse it and support the alternative motion as brought forward by Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor, you wish to close? I'll put the motion. That's the alternate motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. So that is up. So that is successful. That is 10-0. Okay, we move on. We're at 9.5. So I'm happy to get no speakers for that one. So anyone happy to move a motion? Councillor Harris moved, second for Councillor Finlay. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
I need to say that we have been up and looked at the site of this particular development application, and a change of use on the lot number 1 to become general residential rather than I think caretaker's cottage was how it was originally developed, is a sensible adjustment to the planning scheme to reflect its current use as far as that particular one goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay wish to speak to it? Any other councillor wish to speak to it? Deputy Mayor?
I guess I just wish to note that during the exhibition period that no significant concerns were raised, and that the conversation that did occur with regard to placement of boundary and works that would be permitted there was dealt with appropriately, and certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 9.6 to 49 Amy Road. Do we have a mover? Councillor Harris? Sorry?
No, that's all right.
A seconder? Councillor Spencer? Councillor Harris, you wish to speak to it?
Once again, this is a amendment to the planning scheme, but also a development application for some assisted living units in a part of Launceston where this makes good use of the existing land. And I think really beyond that, I don't know that there were any objections against it that I was aware of. I am looking to see if anyone knows there was any objections as such. No. No, it hasn't been exhibited yet, so that is in fact why there's no objections, because we now take it to that part of the zone. But to me, what is being proposed for this land is good use of the land in that particular area. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. With part B, I just wonder if the planner is able to outline the car parking situation. Obviously, the discretion that has been provided in terms of the car parking numbers is considerably lower, and I believe the specific reason for that. I just wonder if the assessing planner could outline that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The scheme requires 26 spaces for the dwellings and 3 spaces for visitors. The applicant has provided 15 spaces for the dwellings and 2 for visitors. In this instance, this is considered acceptable because 1 space is provided for each dwelling. The nature of the use does not allow sharing accommodation, so each dwelling will have only 1 family. That means that each dwelling would have 1 car space. The nature of the use also limits visitors, which means that the 2 spaces can be used for the administration building. Yep.
No further question. Any Councillor Spencer wish to speak to it? Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Harris wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We now no longer sit as a planning authority, and we'll have a 10-minute break to 3:15. Thank you.
Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused.
So thank you. We continue the meeting. So we're on to our Deputy Mayor would like to make.
Mayor, I wonder if I could move that we bring items 16.2 and 16.3 to the fore.
That sounds a very good idea, Deputy. It's seconded by Councillor Soward. And all those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 16.2. Now do you want to leave the room now first or? Oh, very true. Nearly forgot. Speakers for 16.2. Jack Prosser. Is Jack here? Unfortunately, I can't see you out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. So I'm speaking on behalf of Edmund Rice Camps Tasmania, which is a statewide not-for-profit volunteer-driven organisation that provides children, young people and young adults with experiences they may not otherwise have. So Edmund Rice focuses on supporting marginalised and or minority groups to participate in fun, safe environments of acceptance, challenge and growth. The participants involved in our programs are aged mostly between 8 and 12 years old and come from a variety of different and diverse backgrounds and locations in Tasmania. Our programs are driven and created by volunteers. As shown by in 2019, we had almost 20,000 hours from volunteers and placement for over 500 young people. I'd just quickly like to share a few words from Sarah Rowe, who's one of our main referrers, who had given a letter of recommendation. In her words, the students that would gain the greatest benefit can often be hindered due to transport, funding or fear of the unknown. These barriers are continually overcome through good coordination with the EDI team, and I've been so grateful to them for their ability to be inclusive. So on that, I would say that it is the support of this council and similar organisations that have made a difference over the years, not only in increasing the number of programs and participants and placements we can have, but also making sure we continually reach those who would miss out and would receive the greatest benefit from the one-on-one support and the strong young role models from our own community. Thank you for the report received and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Louise Cowan. I don't think Louise is here. No, thank you. Then we go to Gemma. No. And Prem.
Thank you, Mayor and the councillors. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the grant application, Active and Creative Kids Launceston, that's submitted by Nepali Society of Northern Tasmania. Nepali Society of Northern Tasmania is an incorporated and non-profit organization working in the benefit of Nepali people, ethnic Nepali group living in Northern Tasmania. And this organization has been running a Nepali literacy program known as Nepali Bhasalai since 2018. And now this project, Active and Creative Kids Launceston, aims to improve physical fitness and teach the life skills to promote the kids to active adults and creative adults through the participation in different types of sports, music and dance and painting activities. And this project also promotes Nepali culture and tradition, which also contributes the Australian government's policy of multiculturalism. And this will directly benefit 30 to 50 kids and the broader community down the track. And this project also aims to actively involve the parents in the overall development of their children. So I seek the support for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. So now, Deputy, will leave the meeting, and if somebody could move the recommendation, the Rotary Club of Tamar Sunrise. Moved Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Harris. Councillor Soward, you wish to speak to it? Councillor Soward? Oh, say it again. Harris? I'm getting told.
We'd like twins, Mr Mayor.
You are. You look alike. Anyone wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion then. Those in favour? That is all councillors present. That is carried. Deputy Mayor, you may come back in. So now 16.2 for the balance thereof. Moved by the Deputy. Seconded by Councillor Soward. Deputy, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think the speakers that we've just heard have really certainly spoken for the program themselves. But nonetheless, approval of the recommended grants will provide a number of valuable, very valuable educational, social, health and lifestyle benefits to our Launceston community. We certainly know during COVID that it has been the community organisations and the grassroots engagement that has got our community through. The variety of projects and initiatives that are listed are testament to the great way that the department has gone about seeking new initiatives, new partnerships and new opportunities, even in this difficult time. Young people through the arts, sport and recreation, the opportunity to reflect, and the opportunity, of course, to work with migrant members of our community should all be supported. It's been a real pleasure since 2011 to be the chair of this panel and to see the way that we've really moved in the way that we treat and we respect the role that grants play in the transformative role that they can have in our communities. And importantly, I'd like to thank the council representatives who are currently part of the panel in Councillor Walker and Councillor Stosenchek, but also special recognition to our external panel members in Malcolm Bywaters, Ella Dixon and Louise Clark. One of the great changes that we made about 4 or 5 years ago was to involve external panel members, and that's been, I think, a strength. This is one of the most important things that Council does, working with community, and I believe we do it very well, certainly much stronger than we did when I started in 2011, and I recommend the grants as allocated, as recommended to the table.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'd just like to echo the words of the Deputy. He's captured it beautifully, and as I always say, and others say, and we could say for all of the next few items, the far-reaching impact of these grants across the community is huge. It covers a huge range of cultural and educational opportunities, and I think one of the tests to me of local government is to see if it can be as far-reaching as it can be in its support of the community. And looking at the list in front of us with this item and others to come, that certainly is the case in terms of the impact it will have directly and indirectly on literally thousands of people, people who will come to our city, people who enjoy the wonderful activities planned, and again, listening to the speakers who've come along today and outlined what they are intending to do, I think behaves very well on our community. And it's also, Mr Mayor, and I know you always come back to this, the amount of volunteers that get involved, which is so important, and I'm very, very proud to second what's in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the work of our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gibson. I've been on the Community Grants Committee since I joined Council, and I've certainly learned a lot and appreciated his knowledge that he's passed on during that time. And I can't speak for the other event sponsorship groups that he's also been on, but certainly when it comes to the community grants, I've certainly appreciated that knowledge, and thank him very much.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor, wish to close?
Just to say that the diversity of organisations and the pinpoints that this will have on our community, the touch points, are diverse, and the impact, as Councillor Soward has mentioned, is great. And to say it's been a great pleasure to be an advocate and a champion for the community grants over the last 10 years.
Well done. Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we go on to 16.3. And we do have some speakers for 16.3. Marcel Ritchie. Oh, sorry. Oh, you can listen to the speakers, isn't it? Yeah, you're right, Marcel.
Mr Mayor and Councillors, thanks very much for your time. Just quickly, I'm Marcel Ritchie. I work for a global company, a family-owned company, Campari. We have over 4,000 employees worldwide, and through the pandemic, I'm proud to say that we're all still employed. But my company asked me, what can I do for my community? Hence, for the 5th year, next year will be Little Italy, the Italian Festival. I'm extremely proud of what we do. We moved it to George Street, and I think it's done extremely well. We've had more businesses involved in that street than we had for any of the other events that we had in Charles Street and also out the front here. We had a lot more inquiries about next year's, and a lot more businesses in the George Street vicinity and also up the street wanting to be a part of it. So that's been really encouraging for us, and I think especially during these times, people are really looking for those extra avenues to make extra income. Being that it is on long weekend, March long weekend, and when you look at the calendar, there's nothing happening in Launceston on that Sunday. I think we value add to not just the CBD, but to the whole area. We are family friendly and a free event, and as our famous Indigenous actor said, always have been and always will be. And the second and most important part is we don't charge any of the businesses or any of those who want to participate. We don't charge them to be a part of it, and especially during these times when people are trying to make extra income, for the council to facilitate us with some income to enable us to let these stall holders be a part of it and the business be a part of it without actually having to pay for it, and everything they make goes into their businesses, I think it's extremely important. So once again, thanks very much for your support, and we look forward to you all being there next year, and hopefully someone will put their hand up for the celebrity past reading contest. Hopefully, yes, no one's done that yet. But anyway, no, we're reigning champion, Mr Soward. But thank you very much for your time. And as I said, it's an event I'm very passionate about because of the company who said you need to do something for your community. And we do appreciate all the support that you guys give us. So thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Tall.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors. Thanks for putting me on the list, and hopefully we'll have a storytelling festival that'll be up there with the Burning Man within about 15 years. You heard it first. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Thank you. Then we'll move on to 16.3. So we have Councillor Dakin and Dawkins will leave. We'll do those two first. That is the RSPCA and the East Launceston Bowling Club. Move Councillor Soward, seconded Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward?
I have a feeling that the Deputy will fill in the gaps, Mr Mayor, but just to echo the words that I mentioned before in seconding the previous one, great to see such a wide range of activities that have been...
Just doing the two.
Sorry?
Sorry.
Well, it depends, I guess, how wide-ranging two is, Mr Mayor. I think for some people two might be wide-ranging. They're very different events. Thank you.
Deputy?
All said.
I put the motion. All those in favour? And that is all people, all councillors present at the meeting. Left, there's going to say, there's not a few gaps there. That is carried. Thank you. So Councillor Dawkins and Councillor Dakin, come back here. So now we do 16.3, moved by the Deputy in Hulk, seconded by Councillor Soward. Deputy, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take the opportunity. I think what we see here are the small events that our community is going to need more than ever as we recover from what has been a tumultuous year. What is pleasing to note, and of course Councillor Mackenzie, even not being with us, would be pleased to note, is that the recommendations fall within the budget allocation that is provided, but most importantly, there are a mixture of new as well as existing events, and this certainly has been the objective of our event strategy. So to make mention of some, and of course at the time of assessing them, we assessed all of those that were before us as though the events would continue. Some have opted in the time since assessment and now to withdraw, and they're not listed. And as we know, some may certainly withdraw in the weeks and months ahead as the challenges are too great. But at this point, to point out the Launceston City Car Show, which I think will be a wonderful activation in the CBD. Of course, some perennials that we sponsor, including the Relay for Life, are back on the list as they should be. Also some initiatives from the Harvest Market and an Autumn Fashion Festival, working in conjunction with CBD retailers to activate part of the CBD. And one that I think, as well as the Storytelling Festival, as mentioned, that will be an absolute event not to miss, the inaugural Launceston Ukulele Jamboree. That sounds like lots of fun, and I'm sure there'll be a perfect role for the Mayor. So can I recommend all of the recommendations as presented to the table?
Thank you. Did you say for the Deputy Mayor? Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And if you thought the previous item had a broad range of items with the RSPCA and the US Launceston Bowls Club, have I got a promotion for you? In all seriousness, though, this is a really, really wide range of events. I don't think we can top the Ukulele Festival, but I think the Deputy said if we ever need anything like what we've got in front of us, now is the time as we progress out of COVID, and we are in a very fortunate position in Tasmania with regards to that. But one of the things I'm sure all councillors are noting is that people are craving things to attend and to support, and it's a great thing if you're going along to attend something for your own enjoyment, but knowing that when you're there that they're supporting a whole range of things, and that list is very, very extensive. So very proud, Mr Mayor, to support it, and look forward to those events being rolled out, and more particularly seeing you on the ukulele. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dakin, he wants to have a go on the ukulele.
No, I'm more like stand-up drinking. In more serious note, I'd just like to acknowledge the great work that Tracy and Stephanie have done. To pull together and then pull apart and pull together and pull apart all of the applications that have come through, as the Deputy has alluded to. It's been fantastic. It's been a privilege to be on the committee for the last 2 years, and I'd like to acknowledge our fearless leader and the chairman or chairperson of our committee, being Deputy Gibson, who has been there leading the way for a few years, 10 years. Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you, speaking on behalf of myself and the other councillors and other panel members that can't be here. So we wish you all the best in your new committees that you jump on, and thank you. But again, to the staff, thanks very much. We look forward to supporting and having as many festivals that we can cram in as quickly as possible moving forward.
Yep, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer.
Just the one with the evening beats. Did they get the class 1,000 or recommended 0? What's the story of that? They didn't get assessed, or?
That's correct.
Which is a pity, because I think, obviously they didn't fill out the paperwork right or something, but it's a pity we could not give them something.
Well, they've got to meet the criteria and the...
Yep, I know, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy, wish to close?
Just briefly to say that the diverse nature of the organisations, but also the businesses and the sole traders who have put forward innovative events to transform our city, to work with our community. When you look at the investment that Council makes to facilitate and work with those organisations, individuals and businesses, it is a small amount of money, relatively speaking, to the outcomes that are achieved through the events that are included in our calendar.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That is all councillors present. That is carried. We now go back to item 10.1 to the Mayor's announcements. The only thing I will add, I'll comment on is that in the notes it says Thursday the 5th of November to go to present awards at Launceston College, where we were not allowed to go, and it was on the Wednesday night anyway, so I wouldn't have got there. But it's, if that could be taken out, please. Thank you. We'll move on to council reports. Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, Mayor, I'd like to first of all take this opportunity, wearing my events hat, to acknowledge the great work that the Interweave Arts organisation did in staging one of the first large events at the Albert Hall. It was wonderful, and if you haven't yet seen the photos, you really must check out the attire that the Mayor and Mayoress were wearing, because not only were they brilliant, but they would make all of you very proud to be a part of the council. Such was the quality of the creations. But I also want to mention, we saw just then an application from Harvest. I want to congratulate Harvest, who won 2 awards in the Tasmanian Community Achievement Awards. Absolutely so deserving. The innovation that they have had to bring to what they do, particularly over COVID, has been outstanding. As the council rep on the Launceston College Association, School Association, obviously it was not possible to attend the end-of-year graduation and awards, but they still happened in fine form. And it was brilliant that that organisation as well was able to recognise through very innovative ways, adaptation to online and a small-scale event for parents, the successes of all of the students from 2020. And you might have read about some of the particular high flyers in the newspaper. Finally, Mayor, I just want to reference that YAG, our youth group, will be attending a council meeting in December, and we really look forward to hearing of all of their ideas and visions. There'll be some follow-up questions from their council meeting last year, and importantly, the opportunity for them via a community report to share some of the great things that they've taken from their year. And finally, Mayor, I just wanted to touch on yesterday's Remembrance Day. It was a brilliant speech that you gave, and I'm sure Councillor Harris, who was there, would agree. As the Speaker, you did a brilliant job, and that would have been appreciated by all in our community. And finally, to acknowledge that on November 16, if Councillor Mackenzie was here, he would reference that it is the 50th anniversary of live performances at our beautiful Princess Theatre.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you. Any other council reports relevant to representing you as a councillor? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just I attended the flag raising at the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre in Charles Street on Monday this week, and was there and congratulate the Mayor on his speech that he delivered there, which was very well received. Warmly received, and just to acknowledge that also in attendance was our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Gibson, Councillor Dawkins, Councillor Mackenzie as well. Hopefully I haven't missed anyone, but and just as a side note, that today I've read in the paper that the petroglyphs that we've held in our collection for quite a long time have been formally acknowledged to be returned to their place of origin by the state government. So that's extremely positive news during NAIDOC week. Happy NAIDOC week.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Very briefly, yes, I'd just like to thank you for your attendance at the Sally's Ride launch and the speech you gave there. It was very well received, and of course the JCP's Beast program is a recipient of funds from Sally's Ride. So if anyone is still listening out there on the internet, get on board with the Sally's Ride entries. But I also want to just congratulate you on your Remembrance Day speech. I also thought it was a very good speech. It was a very good service. It wasn't particularly moving, but it was the way you wrapped the council's involvement in the First World War was, I thought, very well received, and certainly others mentioned it to me while I was there. Just a quick note that on Sunday, some of us were out cleaning up the catchment at the Tamer NRM as part of our community groups, and I'm pleased to receive that the Kings Meadows Rivulet now has 7 less shopping trolleys in it than it did before Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council reports? Questions by councillors? Councillor Spencer.
Just got a big question whether we can do it or not. I don't know if it's ever been done before. I'd like to invite the President of America to come to Launceston and check out the gorge. There's talk of him coming to Australia next year. I don't know if we can send out an invitation to bring him to Launceston. It could be worth millions of dollars to Tasmania. Thank you.
We'll take that on notice. Thank you.
President-elect.
President-elect.
I did not say who it was.
I was about to ring him up and say you've only got a few months, but anyway. Any other questions from councillors? If not, we'll move on to where are we up to? Heritage 13.1, we're on. Heritage Advisory, moved Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do. In the absence of Councillor Mackenzie, who's the chair of the Heritage Committee, it's a hotbed of activity at the Heritage Advisory Committee, especially because we have our Heritage Snap Awards on about this time next week. I think it's 4 p.m. At the Macquarie House, and that will be to acknowledge all the entrants that we've had of our Heritage Photographic competition from the various categories, a competition designed to obviously highlight and celebrate our rich, diverse built heritage. Also of interest at the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting was the Franklin Village Heritage Project Committee, who have approached the council in developing signage that would help to distinguish Franklin Village, what we might think of as the tail end of Youngtown, as a distinct area. It's probably debatable as to where you could delineate those signs, but it might be something that's of interest to Councillor Harris, being on the Franklin House Committee. And certainly it is something that is an idea worthy of pursuit. I think that we could certainly highlight that area and help to embellish that particular village atmosphere in that area. And also of note, the development work that's going on at the corner of Margaret and Balfour Streets. We've been approached by the developers of that site with a number of interesting artefacts that they have recovered through their archaeological work there. I note that development is well underway now, but that may be the case that there will be an opportunity to display their findings in conjunction with the council at some future date. So something there also to look forward to in terms of our heritage.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay? Any other councillor wish to speak to the... I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 13.2, the audit panel. Moved Councillor Finlay, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Finlay? Councillor Harris? Any councillor wish to speak to 13.2? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. 13.3, Tender Review Committee. Councillor Spencer moved, seconded Councillor Dakey. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Spencer?
we went through that, it was all above board, and I'm happy to accept it.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
I'll just quickly add, I'd just like to acknowledge and thank the current council, the staff at the moment. They're under a huge workload. There's tenders coming in left, right and centre. I know with the Accelerated Works program that we have got a lot coming through, so we acknowledge that and thank you. Because also, for those that are listening on the wireless or the internet, the quality tenders that we're getting through at the moment are fantastic. Quality companies and how closely competitive they are. So just to let everyone know that, that's great.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, question.
Notwithstanding the rigour that Councillor Spencer applies, I just wonder, could we understand what's contained within number 2, the Macquarie House Stage 2 development? Just to understand the delineation between what's included and what's not. Is there someone who can answer that for us?
CEO or? Oh. GM.
So the awarding of the tender for the Stage 2 development is contingent on Council endorsing a plan for the project of the Stage 2 development. So,
great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or speakers? Councillor Spencer, you wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 14.1, Council Workshop Report. Somebody happy to move? Councillor Harris, seconded. Councillor Deputy Mayor. Councillor Harris, wish to speak to it? Deputy? Any councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 16.1, update on impact of COVID-19 on events. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Spencer. Is there a seconder? Councillor Harris. Councillor Spencer, you wish to speak to it? Councillor Harris. Any other councillor? Deputy Mayor has a question.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that's gone into this. The question is, event organisers will be asked to submit a revised event plan, a revised budget and address the criteria. My question is, will the councillors or members of the events assessment panel be the people that assess this?
Who's going to answer that? GM, General Manager?
I'm just struggling with synchronising my agenda, so I can't actually bring the report up on the screen. The request actually was to allow for us to move quickly. That be done by officers. Although where there's time, it would be the intent that we would endeavour to at least run that past the panel. But rather than convening the panel, which can take some time, we prefer the authorisation to be able to assess at the officer level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? Questions? Speaking, Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. Just briefly, obviously, I appreciate that the response to the COVID has now reached the end of its permitted time, and we need to have a way forward with regard to how we deal with events that have been funded, and I think this is appropriate. I certainly take on board the response from the question that I asked, that where possible we would run the list past the panel. I think that should be mandatory, just to ensure that we just have that external look and the rigour that already is applied to events is maintained and the robust nature of assessment is maintained as it has been during this time. Certainly we understand that event organisers have had to shift, adapt and appreciate the wording that is contained within. I note though in the economic impact provision in the paragraph that's provided, events are major contributors to the local economy. The City of Launceston is keen to see as many events as possible return to the calendar. Not seeking the return of uncommitted event sponsorship funds in the event of cancellation demonstrates Council's commitment to the economy boosting activities. I kind of feel like that's a bit of a holdover from the last one, because what I think we're doing here is responding in a different way rather than just saying those organisations that have been funded can keep their funds. We're saying now that period has ended and what we need to do now is just engage in what has been happening and been happening well ongoing conversation and assessment with those things being provided.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Oh, you want to?
Sorry, I just wanted to provide some clarification, and the Deputy Mayor's just brought to my attention that economic impact actually was meant to say not return of committed funds. So thank you for picking that up.
Thank you for clarifying that. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer, you wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we go on to 16.4, special events sponsorship. Move, Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder? Councillor Finlay, thank you. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak?
Just briefly, Mayor, to say that with the assistance of our external panel members from the Chamber of Commerce, Visit Northern Tasmania and City Prom, a vigorous and robust process of assessment was undertaken with regard to this special event category. Of course, we would ordinarily recommend to Council events that fall within the budget allocation that we have. You will note from the next item that we're going to consider in 16.5 that there is a significant amount of funds that are left as a balance, and so the suggestion was that that could be transferred to this category for these two significant events which we're going to look to activate our city even more than ever before.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
I just wish to hear what, when it comes to the Gorge by Night light and sound installation at Cataract Gorge, what discussion has been had in regards to any potential effects on wildlife in the area with noise or with lighting in the evening at the Gorge?
General Manager first, or Tracy?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. The detailed analysis that was conducted as part of the analysis around reimagining the gorge that was conducted a couple of years ago has been provided to Mona Foma, so they have all of the scientific study around the local wildlife and flora, so they have taken that on board, and I believe they are looking to engage their own experts to consider that. It is not projected lights, it is just a short period of time for the laser light show. So,
thank you. Any other speakers? Deputy Mayor, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 16.5, the major events round 2. Deputy Mayor moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Daking. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. You would note, of course, that there are a significantly reduced number of major events than what we are used to seeing. It's important to note that some had submitted an application, but of course, as time's gone on, they've opted to withdraw, given the current guidelines for events. And I guess given the uncertainty, there's also the ability, as we saw as an assessment panel, to assess events with the lens of only intra-state. At the time of assessing them, we were unsure, of course, what would happen in terms of interstate visitation, and that certainly came into our assessment. Again, we had the wonderful assistance of external representatives from the Chamber, Visit Northern Tasmania and City Prom, and their contribution to ensuring that the event's calendar is aligned with brand, but also ticks some of those boxes in terms of visitation and vibrancy was certainly appreciated. Whilst it's not our story to tell, it's important to note that there are significant changes to one event, the Chile Skylight, and that has been assessed accordingly, but still a considerable and comparable amount of money in relation to previous years. And of course the Tasmanian Breath of Fresh Air Festival and a festival called Panama, which perhaps could be the pinnacle of our most environmentally sustainable events in the calendar. Credit to them. So I'd like to sincerely thank Councillor Stosenchek and Councillor Daking for their contributions over this most recent period, and also those external representatives. Since 2011, I've been very proud to champion our event strategy, and I think Councillor Soward and others who were here at the time would say that the way now that our city respects and regards events is absolutely second to none, and we see and value the importance that a vibrant city has through the event calendar that we support. So it's been my pleasure to be a great advocate, a great supporter and a great champion of the events, and I wish the incoming committee all the best.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. What are we up to? We move on to 18.1. I think that's correct, isn't it? Flood Authority. Somebody happy to move that? Councillor Harris, thank you. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Harris, you wish to speak to it?
This is quite simple. It's really just the statutory requirement to produce this quarterly report as produced by the Chairman, Greg Priest, and his committee, and it's there for everyone to read. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. Move on to 18.2, Myrtle Park. Somebody happy to move a motion? Move, Councillor Walker. Sorry? Is there? Wasn't on my list. Is there a speaker? No, there's nobody on the list. Okay. Move Councillor Walker, seconded Councillor Soward. Councillor Walker, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do thank the council officers' work in getting to a point where we can make Myrtle Park recreational ground available for camping for summer as soon as possible. There's been a few iterations that we have gone through in trying to keep the park open, you know, also notwithstanding 2020 being a challenging year for all sorts of other reasons, and under this particular arrangement, it will mean that the camping ground will be available for those in Launceston and surrounding areas who have made use of the area for a very long time, or new visitors. Indeed, we'd be welcoming interstate visitors back to Tasmania who may well make use of the camping ground. I think it's important to note that this isn't a somewhat interim arrangement, that this is a work in progress, and I think that the council, you know, would be more than happy to receive feedback from the public as well as from fellow councillors over the process of implementing this and over the summer to monitor how that works. But I'm more than happy to move this motion, knowing that it will mean that the park is accessible and affordable for local families over summer to enjoy their camping experience. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I'd like to endorse and support the remarks of Councillor Walker in moving this. I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work of General Manager Eberhardt and his team in getting this to us today. It's certainly been very challenging times, as it notes in the report, Mr Mayor, that you know, an expiry of lease in July 2020. The park was closed in March 2020 in response to the COVID pandemic. There's obviously been some significant work undertaken by our staff. There's been a report. So I think it's really important, and I often use the phrase educative, the words educative process. I think some out there might just think a park like this, you know, you just open the gates and away you go and it's all tickety-boo and it doesn't cost you anything to run it. As it spells out very, very clearly, Mr Mayor, in the report, there is significant cost with running and operating a park like this. And as Councillor Walker said, and I know many in our community appreciate the fact that the affordability of this park is so important and enables them to visit it. So in order to keep it that way, it's obviously not a a private concern where sometimes fees are higher. It's something that this council supports, and to that tune, it notes in the recommendation an extra contribution that we need to make, and it spells out very, very clearly where that money's going. It's very important again to note that. As I said, I do think sometimes people think that these things just run and there's no costs incurred with doing them. It spells out very clearly, Mr Mayor, on page 252, the benefits of operating such a space. And, I know many of the people in this room have had experiences, positive experiences, camping at Myrtle Park and visiting Myrtle Park, and I know how highly regarded it is in the community. One small concern for me, and I know others do share this, unfortunately, and it's one of these sort of catch-22s really, we have a very small number of problem situations that arise up there, and those very small number, Mr Mayor, like happens sometimes, chew up resources, chew up costs, create angst and affect the enjoyment of the amenity for others. And the most common one that comes to my attention, and I'd say out of all the things that people write negatively to me on, this is one of the ones, unfortunately, that attracts the most, and it's usually around rubbish, and it's usually around inappropriate antisocial behaviour. The rubbish one always tricks me because I would think if you're going to be carrying it in with you in your car, it's pretty easy to take it home. But notwithstanding that, Councillor Walker touched on the fact that this is a work in progress, and it's very timely given the summer months upon us that people will want to access it. And I know there's been a lot of excitement in the community, queries in the community about when it's going to happen. So very happy to second the motion and look forward to going forward and seeing this development again. Thanking General Manager Eberhard and his team for their hard work on bringing this to us today.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins has a question.
Thank you. If I might just get a little more detail on the $66,000 for telephone and marketing, or for those general expenses, can you just let me know how much of that is marketing, and is that in internal expenses or external?
General Manager Eberhard.
So the other expenses are actually 2,500. The table just hasn't lined up across the columns. So
yes, good. I'm like, there's something's not quite right with this. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm just a bit worried there's not going to be any caretakers out there. I've been stayed out there myself, and you probably need caretakers on site all the time. I don't know how we're going to control it. It's going to cost us $800 a day just to have it open. We need it open. Everyone wants it open. I've had 5 or 6 phone calls with people saying, when you're going to open it, we want to go there. But what the big problem is controlling it. Without a caretaker, we can't rely on police, or we can't rely on security after hours. And what worries me, the gate can't be locked. It might be closed, but it can't be locked for safety reasons. People can come in after hours, stay there, gone next morning, do damage. We don't know who they are. We've got to have a long-term solution for this, and I think Shane's done a good job to get up to this stage. What we need to do is probably put it out to open tender, caretaker, and it's going to cost us money no matter what. But we could get the figures right down. It only probably costs us $10 grand a year, and the other guys that take it on does the cleaning, the lawn mowing, and actually takes the profit. I've got a lot of people that ring me and said, "Oh, we'll take it on," but I think we've got to have a long-term solution. Shane knows what my opinion is, but I don't think it'll get up. And we've got 3 months trial, and then we've got next winter to decide what we're going to do with it. So best of luck with it, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Just to add to say that our staff have been working very, very hard to try and get a long-term plan, and unfortunately the people haven't come forward, and we can't open it without the right people. This is, as other speakers have said, an interim solution to get us through until we do get that right answer. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, and I certainly appreciate the work, but also the expense that's been allocated to this project, even to get us to this point. The rigour that was applied to the Newton and Henry work was appreciated. I note as well we had quite an in-depth representation from Mr and Mrs Locke, who shared some concerns, particularly with regard to the antisocial behaviour that Councillor Soward referenced. So I guess for me, it's about the fact that in the COVID year, it's important to have this camping option available, but it's also important that people do the wrong thing. And I kind of feel like the standard that, that you or your camping buddies allow to occur at the site will eventually perhaps be to the detriment of the people that do the right thing. And that's really sad, because an affordable family recreational opportunity and destination will be unattainable because the costs for us will simply be unattainable. So I would encourage those people who have reached out and want to go, and those people that will book online, to continue to do the right thing, to take their rubbish home, not to steal the wood from other people's property, to ensure that they are undertaking their activities in a legal, but most important, considerate way, so that this great family facility is not lost when it comes back to us after the review period.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the work that's been done by the General Manager Eberhardt and also Phil Bonney and his team about this. Like others, I've had other conversations with the members of the local community. They are disappointed to see that we are removing the day use from the facility. I guess the important thing is that this is only interim, and that we will continue to look for that caretaker, because a caretaker is really the only solution. Having said that, I have used camping grounds in national parks where there is no one on site, and the expectation there is that people take their rubbish in and they take it back out again, and we probably need to reinforce that to those who are hiring the venue from us, to make sure that if they do not do the right thing, then they will simply kill the opportunity for others in the future to use it, because we simply will have to close the ground permanently. And I think that's nothing that everyone wants to do, particularly as one of the people sent me the history of Myrtle Park that started way back in 1932, when the cricket ground was established there, and that after they established the cricket ground, one of the next phase of importance was moving the venue of the St Patrick's River Autumn Show to from the St Patrick's River Hall to Myrtle Park. So it has been a long time part of that local community, and they do want to use it as such. So I guess we've got to work very hard to find that answer. I know it's not easy. I'm not necessarily happy about the expenditure, but it is a necessary evil, if you like, at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Walker, wish to close?
I do indeed, Mayor. Thank you very much. It's been interesting listening to that discussion around the table. Look, of course, I think we all hope for the best. To some extent, it sounds like we expect the worst, and that may be prescient by us, but at the same time, I think there is room for the council, and it's not just with Myrtle Park, but also with other areas such as the Gorge. I only found out recently that, there was an attempted fire setting at the Gorge recently, and it's, absolutely abhorrent that something like that could happen, but nonetheless it did. We have to reinforce that these are, valuable assets. They are precious to our community. People do value them. By far and large, the majority of people do. Whether that takes the form of, more regulation through bookings, through signage, through patrols, whatever that may be, I'm sure by and large most people want to do the right thing. We have taken these things for granted for too long. We, places such as Myrtle Park or the Gorge, we operate as if that they will always be there, that they won't change, that they won't be, that they're nothing of special value almost, and yet they are, and that is obvious once Myrtle Park was closed, how valuable that was to the community. So it's a big wake-up call for all of us, and I'm looking forward to working through this. I understand the expense, and I encourage people to have a look at that, have a look at how much this is costing the council over the next few months to have this open. There certainly won't be any cost, well, not much cost recovery going on. I can't imagine that the council will continue to carry that cost going forward forever. So it is important that we work together to find a solution that will better ensure the longevity of it. Close the ground permanently, no one would like to see that. I know some people suggest it. It would be a sad day indeed. Is it core business for council? I personally think it is. To provide these recreational services is part of our job. That history of Myrtle Park that Councillor Harris speaks of, I'd be certainly happy if he could forward that to all councillors. I'm sure that would make great reading. And that's something else that could be incorporated into that educational process so that people start to become aware of the importance of it to the community in that historical context. So yes, I recommend this motion to council.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We move on to 19.1, council appointments. Moved Councillor Harris. Seconded Councillor Dawkins. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris? Councillor Dawkins. Any other councillor wish to speak? Deputy Mayor.
Just briefly, obviously this is the list of committees at present. Obviously looking forward to a draft terms of reference coming forward for the Cultural Committee and the valuable role that like these committees and external groups can provide in the forward momentum of our city.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harris, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.2, financial report to council. Councillor Finlay moved. Is there a second to Councillor Harris? Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Finlay? Councillor Harris? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.3, the annual financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2020. Somebody move that. Councillor Harris. Is there a seconder? Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris? Councillor Finlay. Any other councillors wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 20.1, Attendance Legat Conference. Move Councillor Harris, seconded Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Harris?
No, only that I considered going to this conference myself, and Councillor Dawkins has put her name forward, and I'm very happy to endorse her to go to the LGAT one-day conference in Hobart.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor? No. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Dawkins? Yeah, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 20.2 is council meeting schedule for next year. Move Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy? Councillor Harris? Any councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. No closed items. We close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.